Good evening, everyone. It is 7:31 on the 23rd of March, 2022. We'll start with the pledge and then move on to our session. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Oops, sorry, adjusting. We're going to go into announcement. I understand that Trustee White would like to say a few words.
Yeah, I have a couple things. One is things are starting to happen now that it's spring. There are a couple things happening Sunday, March 27th. In conjunction with the New York Blood Center, the Star of Bethlehem is having a blood drive at the church from 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. 1 pint of blood saves 3 lives, and New York Blood Center always needs donors. So to sign up, call 800-933-2566. The other thing that is happening at the Awning Boat and Canoe Club on Sunday is they are having a fine arts and crafts show and sale with the Awning Arts Council from noon to 4. And the Awning Arts Council always has great work. So, and of course, the Awning Boat and Canoe Club is a great place to spend a few hours right on the river. So I'm looking forward to going to that and buying things, more art, which I do not need. So thank you.
Great. Any other announcement? Welcome, Trustee Lopez. Any other announcements?
Thanks for welcoming me. I can go. I have 2 quick, kind of related congratulations. Both are police department related. So one is for our chief, Kevin Sylvester, who ran the New York City Half Marathon recently. That is always great to see our police officers, specifically employees generally, out there moving. I think that's a great thing, setting a great example. And the other is Detective Aaron Zimmerman, who recently earned his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've actually trained with him. It is incredibly difficult to earn a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It takes a lot of years, a lot of training. He's very good. Don't mess with him. Not that you were planning to, but now I'm letting you know he's not the one. And so congratulations to him and to his family for that accomplishment.
Sorry, Omar, that's very awesome. I always like to watch the movies, martial arts, obviously, but he's actually a Lieutenant Zimmerman. Used to be a detective, so I just wanted to correct that. Sorry,
I got the belt right and the title wrong. Thanks, Maddi.
Anyone else for announcements? Nope, not seeing any. Well, mine were covered, so I do want to encourage everyone, as the weather warms up, to go to the farmers market Saturday. I believe it is Bacon Festival Day of some sort. Not something I normally push, but it sounds, if I were to eat it, I would be going down there and really enjoying it. Instead, I'll be buying my usual pickles, etc. But, you know, please do venture to the middle of our village. Maybe take a moment to note that we have the Ukrainian flag up. Thanks for staff to locating, putting it up last Friday, as I mentioned in my mayor's note. And, you know, not much I could add to the situation in Ukraine. I am, however, learning that sometimes symbolism and small moments of acknowledging and standing with people around the globe means things to people here in Austin, because I have received emails. I was not aware that, you know, we do have a number of our residents who were either born in the Ukraine or have parents, grandparents who are from there. And so they're appreciative in addition to other members of the community. So I always appreciate the feedback. So thanks to staff for putting the flag up. And when you're downtown, grab a cup of coffee, grab a beer at the brewery, and all the other great stuff. As Dana said, this is a great village to roam around in, go to events, and enjoy yourself with your neighbors. And looking forward to a very interesting work session today. So, Village Manager, you are on.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to introduce Pat Yost, who is the chair of the Recreation Advisory Board. He is first on our agenda tonight with a presentation about capital improvement plans for the rec center, which we will be getting some funding help with through the Downtown Revitalization Initiative and a grant that was secured by Assemblywoman Sandy Galeff. I also want to acknowledge Trustee Casada, Deputy Mayor Casada, who has been involved in this as a liaison on the Recreation Advisory Board. And I believe, is Bill here as well? Because I'm
Yeah,
not.
yes.
Yeah, Bill, and of course, Bill, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing my full screen tonight. Bill Garrison, our Recreation Superintendent, they've all been busy working along with the entire Recreation Advisory Board on plans to make sure that we have a state-of-the-art community center. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Pat and Bill.
Welcome, gentlemen. Always nice to see the two of you. I miss my days on the committee. I would see you a bit more often. I am hopeful that the two of you will remember to invite the board to the annual Celeb when you guys tour the parks, and at the end of which there is a nice little picnic by the waterfront or at a park. So as we go into spring, just a quick free invitation to the board would be great. Just saying. Hi, Pat. Hi, Bill.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So Maddi, can I share my present screen, or do you?
Unless you want me to run it for you, whatever you prefer, Pat.
Sure, that's fine. If you got it, great.
Yep, hang on one sec.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time and this evening. As the village manager said, this is the output of the entire board and the entire board's kind of series of discussions over the last several months. I think, as a recreational advisory board, we spent a significant amount of time looking at and putting together an approach for the open park spaces throughout the town and the village, and putting together, hey, these were our thoughts relative to that. And then we've kind of moved on now and have spent a fair amount of time over the course of the last year in conjunction with some of the folks from Nexus at looking at what's possible within the rec center. And this is a summary of the entire group's thinking. It's not just me. So I want to thank everybody, right? So if you go to the next page.
I'm frozen. Keep talking.
Okay. Oops.
Hold on, I'll get it back.
I've got it.
I'll get it back.
So, okay. So I think the front and center, most recently with the recreation center has been this is a core component of the DRI, and the rec center is really kind of important to not just the village but also the town, and it's right in the middle, in the heart of the village. It gets used a significant amount. And I'm not sure that people really understand how much it gets used. Bill and I were talking, and the reality is that the rec center gets used over 100,000 times a year, right? And when you start thinking about it from that perspective, really it does make sense to invest in this as a core part of what the village has to offer its residents. And the variety of programming that happens down there. And so with the village, it provides recreation and programming to children, teens, and adults of all income levels and all over and from all over the local geography, right? The the words on this page are taken straight out of the DRI initiative, and it focuses in on, how do we make, speaks to the vision a little bit about making this a destination location for everybody within the village, and really to focus in on how do we make it, good for the next 20 to 30 years. On page 3, the way we've kind of packaged all of the different work is in 5 different buckets. And what I'll do is I'll take you through each of the 5 buckets from in summary. The details are on the page, but I'll talk through the highlights, and at the end I'll be happy to, or during I'll be happy to answer questions. I think we kind of broke it into these 5 specific kind of sub projects because they make sense both from a funding perspective as well as an execution perspective. The first one really is focused on leveraging the results of the Nexus study to make the interior upgrades in using the existing footprint and optimizing the space, making sure that we can use it for the youth bureau, making sure that we can use it in an appropriate way for the adult and senior activities that we've got going on, plus all of the youth activities from that standpoint. The second kind of piece of work is something that needs to get done. There's leaking in the gym area at this point in time. Really not sure we need to harden the roof, but the reality is that we need to make repairs to the roof, and we need to look at it to see if anything needs to be done to it to prepare for potential future projects that were mentioned in Nexus. But we've kind of, in this presentation, we've kind of pulled those out to a separate bucket at the end, for operational and for funding purposes, right? The third one, it really is a transformative, a little bit more longer term vision. But the reality is that the gym space is one of the most overscheduled, pieces of plot in the whole area. There are, we regularly have discussions at the Rec Advisory Board about, how do we allocate that as a scarce resource, either on the weekends when you've got potential conflicts in the winter between, pickleball and soccer and baseball preseason work, or during the middle of the day when you have after school activities and pickleball going at the same time, or just throughout the course of the day, right? So from that perspective, it really is one of those areas where we've got a vision of using some of the available external space and adding a half gym with some additional rooms, and really think that would be a transformative kind of long-term goal. The fourth one really is to focus in on the pool and the swimming pool and the locker room and some of the internal pool repairs that need to be made. And then the fifth one is we've kind of bundled up what we're calling the sustainability related activities, and that we're kind of part and parcel of a bunch of different proposals. Some of it's in the Nexus, some of it's been brought up separately. So things like electric charging stations, potentially solar panels on the roof, potentially green roof, potentially some different lighting, whatever makes sense. We've kind of packaged that together into a sustainability related project. So now I'll talk through each of these in a little bit more detail. So the first one is that we've been working with Nexus over the course of, and the trustees have been working with Nexus over a year to really kind of understand what could be potentially done to the interior footprint of the rec center, right? This includes creating a secure entrance, a single secure entrance to manage the inflow and outflow from the facility. It improves the meeting spaces, and it improves the kitchen space to bring it more up to speed, both so that it can serve the senior meal projects during the middle of the day, as well as serve as a potential cooking kitchen, which would be an additional set of activities that can be offered. We would, part of this includes updating a portion of what is currently being used as the museum space to house the Section 8 housing operations. And then just, fundamentally, there's a whole lot that needs to be done to that facility, given how much it gets used and given when it was built, to really bring it up into to the 21st century, whether that's adding Wi-Fi, whether that's adding Wi-Fi for places where students can potentially work after school if they need to, or we all learned during COVID how important it is to have connectivity. The initial estimates through the Nexus project are somewhere around the $2 to $2.5 million. Clearly those need to get refined a little bit, but that's what was included initially in the DRI proposal the DRI request, right? And the value to the community is just immeasurable here, right? It improves security, it improves the quality of the senior programming, continues to provide a central location within the village for both, during the day, during the weekend, and after school activities from that perspective. Okay. So the next page is just a couple of pages that were taken out of the initial conceptual designs put together as part of the Nexus study, which it's tough to see here, right? But the point is that the significant amount of work has been done to put on paper what this looks like, and the Recreation Advisory Board thinks that the recommendations, as they're put forward within the Nexus study, really do make a significant difference and meet some of the immediate needs from that standpoint. Okay. Second project really is a capital project to focus on the roof of the structure. Currently there's some leakage in the gym, and then there needs to be a little bit of work done to understand, do we need to do anything if we are at some point in time it's feasible and it makes sense to do something like put a solar roof on there or add a green space, add a green roof or something like that point, right? So, the fundamentals of this project really are to do a bit of an engineering study, understand what really needs to happen, get the bids, figure out how to pay for it, and then execute from that standpoint. All right, that's fairly simple. The third project is one that as a board, we understand this is a little bit more visionary, but we really do think that this is taking it beyond just bringing the current facilities up to current standards, right? The gym is it's overscheduled, right? There are more people that want to use the gym than there is time available to share it out, right? Even adding the staff on the weekends, it's used full time on Sunday when it's open in the winter, and the reality is that more people want more time on the Sundays as well, right? So the thought is that really we design and build an extension to the community center, kind of to the north or behind the existing gym. Currently there is a hallway that runs between the gym and the pool. There's a set of double doors that go out into a flat open space in the back there. There is a small kind of work area, plus there's the stage, which is currently being used as the center of the new gymnastics offerings that the Recreation Center is offering, which are really doing very well. People really like that. So the idea is that we can convert that stage area to gymnastics / playroom space, construct an additional half gym out the back using the current open space that's there, and then extend the hallway. Fundamentally, it makes it the access is easy, the space is there, and a half gym would allow with a distinct half gym would allow for multiple types of programming to occur at the same time. So think of this in terms of, during the late afternoon, you could have after school programs going on at the same time that you might have pickleball going on in a different area, or you could have youth basketball going on at the same time as a gymnastics clinic or a soccer clinic. Things that currently aren't possible right now because of the single space, which is a great space and it's fantastic space. But because it's a single space, it's and it's overscheduled, having an additional half gym would just make a huge difference. Okay, from that perspective. And then and so if you go to the next page to help people visualize kind of what we're looking at, on the left-hand picture, You can see there's a little green line added kind of off the back of the gym. So, you know, you've got the current gym labeled, you've got the pool area, you've got the current stage building there, and then the flat area, of which there's a picture on the right, is, you know, quite honestly, that's where we would suggest, you know, adding the half gym as a really like transformative project for the next 20 to 30 years. Fourth project is a series of repair and upgrade activities to the pool and the locker room facilities. You know, this includes a series of kind of bundled repairs, such as, you know, replacing the spray park features, you know, resurfacing the underwater of the pool, replace the interior of the lights with LEDs. The roof needs to get replaced, and then perhaps the most visible kind of change that really needs as part of this is really it's a gut renovation of the 2 locker rooms. You know, they haven't been updated in 20 plus years, and when you go in, you can tell. You know, not necessarily a need to change the footprint, other than we would suggest that in the open space between the 2 locker rooms, there currently is no family changing area. So if I show up, if I had shown up when my daughter was 6 or 7, you know, there was no place for me to go with her to help her change her from that perspective, which is a big kind of miss from a usability and accessibility perspective. So, you know, so the major kind of structural change that we would suggest is put a family changing room in the space there in between the 2, and we feel that it can be done in a way that provides, you know, appropriate utilization and something that isn't there right now. This one's pretty far along. The Bill and the village, the village staff and the engineer have all been working to really come up with an updated set of kind of cost estimates for the different components of this. Those are included on this, you know, on this page. And so, you know, from here we suggest, you know, completing the cost estimates, you know, initiate the project with the Department of Health because it is a pool facility and needs to get through those, and then you know, continue to work with the funding opportunity that was provided from Assemblywoman Galiff to really leverage that to update the pool and the locker room facilities. The final project is what we're calling a sustainability related project, and these activities were all kind of bundled together, you know, primarily in order to from a funding perspective. You know, we felt that there probably was, or there might be over the course of the next couple of years, you know, some opportunity to have a, you know, relatively shovel-ready set of sustainability initiatives for a particular facility where there might be funding available. And so we've included some things in here like LED lighting, potential solar panels for the roof, you know, EV charging stations, you know, and you know, just kind of like a package of sustainability focused projects for the building from that standpoint. So, you know, from fundamentally, those are the 5 projects. You know, each of them has its own sort of, you know, next steps. Perhaps the most immediate and the one that's really been being worked on over the last couple of weeks is, you know, finalizing the pool estimates and submit those for the same grant funding request. You know, as part of the DRI, you know, we do have the broader transformation improvement project, leveraging the Nexus work as part of the DRI, and then you know, a specific engineering study for the roof repairs. You know, knowing that the half gym addition is a longer term project, that there's probably a feasibility study that needs to get done. And then, you know, just keep in the back of our minds as their potential funding sources may arise for sustainability related projects, just now that we've got a bundle that have been identified that could be ready to go at any time. And that's what we put together. Any questions, thoughts? Happy to answer them.
Yeah, so I do have a bunch, but let's start with going around the gallery. Anybody? First of all, thank you very much, Pat and Bill, for everything. And yes, the advisory, this advisory committee will have, I think, representing the public at large, and their own knowledge over the years and institutional knowledge will play a significant role in the DRI, as the community center is a big part of DRI. So I appreciate you weaving that in as well and working on that as well. Anybody have comments or questions?
Yeah, I could start. The pool. There's an estimated time on when the pool would be out of use, because this goes back to when we were in the middle of COVID and it wasn't getting used, and there was discussion of having that taken care of then. Obviously, that did not happen. So is there an estimated time that the pool would be out of use? Because I know that's very heavily used.
Well, what we would hope to do is to coordinate the work of the pool surface and the lighting, and we estimate that to be down for a week.
So you're going to have the lighting replaced and the pool resurfaced in a week.
Right.
Okay, that's all I got. Thanks. That was a good presentation, by the way. Looks good, Pat.
Okay, next, anybody?
I'll go next.
Sure.
Thank you, Pat, for the detailed presentation as always. I have two questions, one micro, one macro. So the micro question is with respect to the third priority that you named around the gym space and building out the half gym and all of that. One of the needs that this has come up in my own life, which is the reason that I know about it, is particularly in the cold weather, which is an extended period of time in this area, there aren't a ton of indoor places to take young kids. And that is tough because like on weekends and stuff like that, like there's just not a lot of places to take them. And so the community center similarly has activities, but not necessarily an unstructured space that folks can go to with young kids. Might this open up the possibility for some unstructured space for folks with young kids to be able to use, particularly in the cold weather?
Yeah, I do. I think so, right? Because as we were talking through the value of the space, right? That was one of the things that came up, right? Like a place for people to go, especially in the winter, right? And we have power outages, people have heating issues, people, like you said, the parks just aren't available, right? So the use of the facility really goes up. So there are really kind of two places in that vision where that might come into play. One is the actual gym space itself, but the other is the space in between the current gym and where this would be built, kind of like that, like the stage space. The reality is the stage only gets used once or twice a year, right? So it would be possible to have some sort of a temporary stage like put in place when it needs to get used, but that's a relatively big space that could be turned into play space or gym space or something like that. So yes, that's absolutely a use that could be woven in there.
That is helpful. Thank you. And the second macro question is, one of the things that I don't feel like I have a great handle on is how Ossining compares to other communities, surrounding communities in Westchester with respect to our rec programs and resources. Do you have any kind of context that you could share with respect to that?
I think Bill's probably got some good context there.
Yeah, there are very few municipalities that have a community center like ours with a gym, with a pool, and the amount of activities that we offer. We get a lot of people that want to be from out of town that want to be in our programs. So we have different rates that we charge, but I think if you look to compare to other municipalities, well, we're right there at the top in Westchester County for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's one of the things that, and this is a question that could be an email so we can follow up offline, but fast facts like that I can share broadly and brag about the work that y'all do on behalf of the community and the resources that we have would be super, super helpful. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for the presentation, Pat, and onward.
I think, just, I kind of did a little soundbite at the beginning, right? But as Bill and I were talking through, we were just kind of like finalizing the presentation, and we started talking about how much does the rec center really get used? And the reality is there's about 100,000 uses, people that go through that place a year, right? When you think about that, that's 100,000 uses is amazing. That's a huge amount of place. And then by increasing the capacity, that only could, it's going to grow it, and it's just another huge resource like the parks.
Oh, I just have one quick question. I'm not sure, the community center has an emergency generator backup system on that building? And if it does, is it able to handle the extra load if you build that gym, small gym?
It does have the backup generator. I don't know the answer to the second part of that question.
All right. I mean, I think that should be me personally, being an electrician that I am, that when you do go into, RFP and RFQ and whatever you're going to do with that extra gym, that should be calculated into the overall load of what's going on in the generator, what you have there. That's all.
That's good.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Pat. Sounds like there's gonna be a lot of activity going on at the community center over the next couple of years.
Yes.
Exciting activity. I didn't realize there was that much space on the north side of the building. That's a lot. And, quite a few people have brought up possibility of having a community garden in the village. We have one, but it's, it's way out in Cedar Lane Park and hard for some people to get there. And a small community garden, it would seem to make sense at the community center. Because if you then want to have a teaching kitchen, you could do a little farm to table type thing, maybe, you could grow and, but I don't know if a new half gym or which would be amazing, pickleball, would take up the whole space out there, or if there would also be room for a garden, or I don't know, just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, it's part of the, we just kind of like walked it out, right? In terms of the space, in terms of like, hey, is there enough here? There would be additional space left over. There's actually, there's a little bit of a patio over there on the side, actually close to the pool, that I don't think gets used at all from that standpoint. And, the question is, to a certain extent sort of becomes, how much space, do we want to try and work in for a community garden somewhere, right? And there's a fair amount of green space in the village, there really is. So it's something that we can start to look at a little bit more closely about where might something like that go.
Okay, thank you. Manny, are you speaking? I can't tell what's happening.
Yeah, I was gonna go first, but somebody else took my
You
spot.
gotta jump in faster. I'll go alphabetical next time.
Thank you. Well, I'm still gonna go
I'll
last.
do you first, but what can I tell you?
All right. No, Pat, obviously, thank you and all the board members for great work and a great presentation as always. Him and I had actually a conversation a couple months back about this, and I thought it was a great idea. Without even looking at the whole proposal, I think the concept itself, I think, is great. Forget about this component of the community center, or the DRI portion of it. Even if we didn't have that money, I'll still be pushing to do this work in the community center, because I think it's something that we needed. Not only that, but just something that I don't think was brought up. We do have the youth center, and there's a lot of more programs and a lot of more stuff that is going to be happening in the next, I'm hoping within the next year or so. So our community center itself is going to be well utilized. And I think rearranging some spaces are helpful, but I think we definitely going to be needing more room in here. So as an overall, I really don't have any questions, Pat or Bill, for this matter. So thank you, Bill. But I'm in favor of this. I think we have to figure out a way of how to get this accomplished. To me, will be soon rather than later. I think the timeline, we can work that out with, obviously, now that we are making this part of a bigger project in a way and getting some additional fundings. I think I would love to move forward with this project as is, and maybe a little bit more if anything comes out of that as well. So Pat, again, thank you so much for your presentation. Mayor, I really don't have any questions. I'm in favor of this project.
Thanks. So I have some questions, comments, and some professional sharing of information. I work and have for quite a while in a nonprofit community center that is larger both in space and scope than what Awning has. It's actually very large and has schools. It also has the largest gymnastic program in Westchester County. So let me share first professional opinion. I'm sure gymnastics came up. A school system should support a gymnastic program, not a community center. It requires a tremendous amount of equipment, even at the lower level, professional staff that becomes unaffordable over time, and insurance liability. It is the sport that has the most injuries to women in the United States. The body injury caused by equipment, falling, and all the other stuff that goes with it increases your insurance liability, and you can't use these floors for anything else. And all of these little tots programs and all of that should be left to private industry or to public school systems that can manage teams. So I am not in support of that item. It's a single item in one of the proposals, because in principle, I don't believe that the strategy of a community center should be to take on programs that aren't done, that can be done in private industry and really can't be done by public. The operating expense of gymnastics year to year is almost as high as running a pool. I think, if my memory, I don't know, Bill, what do you pay every month for electricity for that pool?
Oh, it's in the thousands.
It's in the
Yeah.
tens of thousands, I would think. No, it's
for
not.
the building itself. Yeah, it's close to
Yeah.
that.
The
7 or
pool,
8,000.
yeah, the pool is really expensive to run, and it never ends, right? Because water damages everything it touches. Let's be honest. Tiles have to be redone. The pool is probably the only thing more expensive, and there is no economies of scale. The bigger you build a gymnastic program, the more expensive it becomes. The bigger you build the pool, the more expensive it becomes. There's no like economy of scale the way a theater has or anything else. And it just stays with you all the time. So I'm not a proponent of starting programs unless they fit strategically within what the group thinks a community center stands for. Which brings me to a more macro question, is what is the goal of a community center as you grow it? From my perspective, you have to decide how a community center fits in vis-a-vis school systems, library systems, etc. Otherwise, we're all building a bunch of infrastructure silos. So do you need a stage if the library has a stage? Maybe, maybe not. Do you need to supply after school program if the school should be doing that? Maybe, maybe not. But when you're a small, tiny little village, of which we were, who knows, probably before I moved here 28 years ago, it's very easy. You build a community center for the community. As you get bigger and the school gets bigger and the library gets bigger and all is supported by tax dollars, I'd like to see sort of in the next presentation, Pat, some sort of a cohesive sort of strategy between these public offerings in the village and how they fit together. Otherwise, we're just building more stuff. It would just be helpful, I think, for the public to see the availability of space all within 2 to 3 miles of each other. Actually, it's all very close. So that's like my sort of professional, like for what I do to pay, as I always like to say, my mortgage and water bill, and just my own. If I were sitting on the committee, I would have said it in the meeting. As far as building the building out, I'd like almost all of the focus to be about better use of current space. Karen, when she did the tour with us, not Karen alone, obviously we were all there, but when she spoke, had said to the folks that were there on the tour that there's a lot of space, but it's not used well. So we're left with using space as best we can. But in fact, there's 2,500 square feet in there, 2,500 square feet, like where the old Sing Sing Museum thing is there. And we should use that space differently. We should use the offices differently. We should move the main entrance from a whole bunch of reasons downstairs, not upstairs, for all sorts of reasons. And so, and no part of that was to extend the building. I'm not really a proponent of extending building, but the outside should be used for outside items, not to build yet more floors. And by the way, that's a slope, that north side. It's not a straight on piece of land. There's a patio there. Nobody uses the patio next to the art room. So my understanding was that we were going to revisit that. I'd like to really focus on, and to have you guys focus on, both with what Sandy Galiff gave and what you guys are recommending, on better use of space rather than push the building out. Just something to think about. That to me seemed a little surprising to have seen that pop up. I've been sort of focused on the planning for community center. It's the first time I've seen it being pushed out to build yet another piece of infrastructure.
Okay, so I'll say that I think the component one of the 5 different project really is focused on that interior on that internal space, and it's also includes as part of that the I'll call it the eastern patio off of the art room. Okay.
Yeah.
So it includes that, and it includes a repurposing of and a bit of a redesign of both like the current game room downstairs. It includes repurposing of the space in where the Sing Sing Museum currently is, right? So all of that you're talking about is packaged in that first kind of project, and really is the like the initial kind of core focus, right? I mean, so that to that point, I think that yes, and that's a very specific sort of bundle, right, from that standpoint. And so to that point, I do think that is along with the pool space and the roof, like very much the initial kind of focus areas, right? Because that's tough to get done. Okay, as we were talking about the vision of like the very and I think you probably heard some of the discussions when you were sitting on the board, but like every session there are conflicts of we have to give up this for that or this for that, and from a space perspective, and so that's where we started getting the idea of, well, how can we fix that? So
yeah, it's only if you view that as a problem, though. I think it's like highways, when you have 3-lane highways and they become 4, you think the traffic is lessened. Every study says the opposite, just more cars use it. So you have to make a strategic decision whether you want to take the tax dollars and use it to do more per square foot or add more footage. It will always get used more and more and more. There are 30,000 people here, before you start building the second community center. Those are decisions, and that Pat was to my point of how to have a conversation with the library and with the school, who have bigger budgets, to think through who has what and who does what, and how the public understands where things are. If you want to have open gym time and open space outdoors for a community garden or any of those kind of things, you cannot keep building gyms. You actually have to figure out how to create open space for families. It all comes back to what's the purpose of the community center. I love the locker room discussion. Thank you for including that. And nobody thinks about that stuff. I'm so happy the committee is seriously thinking about like a family change room. It's, there is divorce rate's about 50%. Oftentimes a single parent is a male with female children, a female with male children. It is such a problem. And in fact, you will be solving a family problem. We have grandparents watching grandchildren. all sorts of stuff that we want to encourage. It's a good thing, you know, family unity. So happy to hear, I would add a transgender facility as well in that mix if possible. I don't know what the room is. I know you guys are thinking 20 to 30 years out. I don't know what things will be like, but having a second space that allows for people who, for whatever reason, are not comfortable in a larger changing environment would be also something I would just throw into the mix. I don't know if that was thought about and declined or not thought about, but so happy to see you guys giving that much thought to that angle. Nobody ever thinks about that stuff. So thank you for doing that. I don't know, Karen, if we ever announced that with Sandy Gala for the grant. I mean, like you guys discussed it in this presentation, but I'm not sure there was ever an actual.
So yeah, I mean, we haven't, part of it is the way the grant works. So what we like to do with the DASNY grants is these are dorm authority, they're state municipal grants. They're called SAM grants, and they go through the dormitory authority, and there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of time to get the grant disbursement agreement. I don't think that there's you know, this is something that's in a process, and we will be submitting, there's just a few hoops we had to jump through to shape the way they want to see it. So we will be doing it specific to funding for the pool and community room use, and that's what the money would go towards. We'll be able to, I think that as we get closer with the grant disbursement agreement, we can reach out to Assemblywoman Galiff and be more public about it. But it does just go through a little bit of a process, which is why we haven't really talked about, because we're still working through that process. But it's not necessarily private either. It's just
It's hanging out there. We're working on it.
Yeah,
No, but
it is a little bit, but the paperwork will be going into DASNY very shortly. And this was helpful because we have two different grant streams working that work very, very differently. And we're trying to make sure that we leverage them appropriately. And there's a different criteria for each, so.
Yeah, and that's why I say that, like, we're now big enough as a village that we should think strategically about what we want community centers to do for the next 20, 25 years. Hopefully, there is a parking issue that the bigger you build and the more they come, the more parking you need. So that'll come next. Nobody's asking, honestly, Pat, that a volunteer, you know, committee redesign, you know, our entire community center and give us a strategic plan for the next 20 years. Because by the way, if your committee does it, we might need to fire all the consultants and just have this committee do all the work, because that would be that kind of a lift. So I want to tell you how, you know, I have to almost remind myself, it's a volunteer committee of people that have come up with these really solid plans with the help of staff like Bill Garrison, etc. So I think it's great. I mean, it's so detailed. You've thought about a whole bunch of stuff. I know there's going to be security discussions in the future. I know there's going to be, how does the camp fit into everything discussion. I will tell you that some of the most affluent municipalities in Westchester don't have this kind of thoughtfulness about how one thinks about community and community centers and the programs and projects and how we could do more, not less. So very grateful for all the work that you guys are doing. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents worth because I live with it every day. And it would be a shame not to share like some of the costs and structures. I know what we pay for heat to heat up a pool, because that has 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, except Mr. Fritchie for the 2 weeks in August that the pool is emptied out and the tiles have to be fixed. It takes us 2 weeks, but maybe here it'll be faster, but it takes us 2 weeks to recondition the pool every single year, and it's usually shut down another time of the year for a week to do some typical maintenance work. There's a lot of work involved in pools and the areas around pools. And the water qualities and all the other stuff. So very much appreciated. Thank you, Pat, to you and the whole committee and liaison and Bill. Anybody have last words? And by the way, Manny, I know you're involved in this too. I can't tell you how excited I am that that Assemblywoman Galoff has used both, has really reached out and said, how can I help you guys? Because it's a significant amount that we are hoping to get. So these are like all good things.
Yeah.
Annie?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And you know, it's always good to hear a different perspective, especially like you said, you have the experience on a community center. You do this almost 24 hours, 7 days a week, as much as you know we do village work.
12 hours a day, 7 days a week, but yeah. The other 12 is for this job, but go ahead.
But you know, it's always good to see a different perspective in how the utilization of those spaces are. You know, I'm still in favor of doing this. Just to clarify, the addition that Pat proposed is not a huge addition, is a small portion of what the rear is. And if my recollection is correct, and I don't think maybe Karen may remember, maybe. I know Paul will definitely remember. We did have a grant a long time ago when the first pool was put into the plan, where the county was supposed to be doing some work in the back, doing a patio, doing this whole cantilever stuff and everything that was never built. So there were plans for that. And just as a quick reminder to the board, when I first got elected, I worked with Henry Atterbury at that time, and we walked the spaces. And it was a motion of, you know, how much the community center was used in there almost, I'm talking about 9 years ago. And that hasn't changed. I think the only downsides that we had, it was COVID at this point, sure. But I think reimagine some of the spaces and thinking on the future, the way we want to utilize the space and how to use programming and the stuff like I mentioned, the youth bureau itself. You know, I know we're not utilizing the current spaces the way we could because of some areas that are restricted right now. But I think in the future, I'll be definitely looking forward to see a small addition to it because as you mentioned, Mayor, when we did the walk with a consultant from Nexus, we did talk about a small addition on the side, open up this whole wall, creating this more room, bringing the inside and outside, you know. So we did talk about a little bit of a concept of adding more space to the building itself. I think the utilization of where Pat and the committee have chose the idea, and I think it's something that could be suitable to that extent. So that's my 2 cents. Again, I think this obviously this is something that's in front of us. I think we can. So I'm not sure. Karen, help me out in this. The recommendations were brought in front of us. I think we all have different, a strong opinion that we need to do something in the community center, but I'm not sure what the next steps are. And just one thing, sorry, Karen. One thing that I'm not sure, maybe I missed it, maybe Pat, you did mention, did I miss that we also, I know the town also got a grant for the kitchen renovation and as part of the senior program as well. So I'm not sure. Obviously, that's going to complement a lot of the stuff that we have to do that we're going to be doing in there. But just again, it's not just one grant. I think it's more like 3 grants, sort of, or potential 3 grants, sort of rubbed together. So, Karen, if you can explain to us, I guess, the next steps on this and how we go about it.
Sure. So there right now there are 3 grants that are at play in the community center. One's a Cdbg grant for the kitchen, which is part of the senior nutrition program that's already underway with the county. That's been underway for a while. So that will be done. There's the DASNY grant, that the SAM grant that I just talked about, that would be specific for the pool. The DRI money, in a sense, the community center, the total project, and for the DRI, it does not have to be the final plan. Like there can be adjustments to it, but right now for the DR funding, we have a plan going forward that we have a basic estimate for. We know we're going forward to it. There's board commitment. There's other resources going to it. So at this point, we're in a pretty good position to draft this as submit this as a call for projects. They do have an estimator working with the consultants that the state's providing, who could put up some cost estimates. And those cost estimates would be used for the state to determine let's just say for argument's sake, everything we talked about tonight is going to cost $5 million, $6 million. The DRI will say, you know, and they'll take into consideration that some monies may be coming out of place. They're not going to fund the whole $6 million, but they'll fund, say, $2 million. Or $1.5 million, probably around the ballpark that they would fund. And then that way we would then go to a final design. You know, we'd go to an RFP for a design and architecture and design services and bid documents, then create the big documents. And we would know that even though the plans may change somewhat and we may or may not decide to do extensions or other things where we want to incorporate you know, changes along the way, once we get the final design, we know that it will fall into the framework that we had established for the DRI, and the DRI monies will be used to offset that budget. Does that make sense?
You're on mute, Maddi.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So I'm having a little bit of a sort of calibration issue. The Rec Advisory Board is not a citizens council for the village. It is an advisory board for the Board of Trustees in helping make decisions. This presentation is a very specific presentation on behalf of the Rec Advisory Board for specific projects. Are we in some way, by saying, hey, I support this presentation? So normally these presentations, which I've asked for by every board, including land use, is to update the board and the public of what they're doing. This isn't so much that kind of presentation. What we're looking at is recommendations going forward with very specific projects, usually done by staff, not by an advisory board. So this is sort of a confluence of two ideas. I don't have a problem with it, but I want to be clear about what we're looking at and what we're agreeing to. I mean, it's a little bit different than what I was expecting and what actually the advisory board is designed to do. That's actually not their goal. That's not what they're set up for. This kind of presentation could have been done by staff and by the superintendent with a footnote that said, hey, I spoke to the advisory board and they like this idea, or I think it would be done at budget time. So it's a little bit different than certainly what I thought I was, not that what I was going to see, but I do want to make it clear that this is not actually the mission of the Rec Advisory Board. So it opens up sort of a more of a conceptual conversation, which is fine. And this is all very helpful. However, when I say I'm in support or not in support of what was presented, not by the staff actually, but by Pat on behalf of the board, would I, with my one vote, not that I'm legally voting, I understand that, Stuart, but to everything that's being presented and then publicly presented, the board agreed to everything? Because I appreciate the presentation, but I'm not agreeing to all this stuff. So
no.
Okay.
I think that's a really, so here's where this is.
I'm distinguishing what we're looking at.
So I want to really, so one of the things about the DRI is that it's a little bit of a challenging thing because you apply for it saying, what would you do with $10 million and everything, whatever you want, $10 million. And then you apply and then you get the money and they, okay, for us to give you this money, you have to have shovel-ready projects in 6 months. So we're basically shaping. And one of the things that's really valuable is like, you know, different volunteers bring different skills. We know that Pat has a tremendous amount of skill as a project manager. So this sort of fell into his professional niche, and we benefited as that. We're not approving this plan per se. We are approving the idea that we will be incorporating a plan that will address many of the issues that have brought you. And a lot of this was informed by work that staff did and that has been thought about over the years. So it's, you know, Pat's just done a really great job of pulling it all together and adding input from what the Rec Advisory Board has seen. So what this is, basically the DRI will say, conceptually, this is what we'll be putting forth. We now are going to the next phase which will be funded hopefully in part by the DRI. And that would be the architectural design and design phase, where we would then do RFP for a design firm, an architecture firm. They would then base their design on a lot more work that would get you to the point where the board is deciding, yes, we want, yes, we want to push out, not push out, but yes, we want to make some of the changes that were in the nexus, that were talked about in the past. Yes, we may want to do this. No, we don't want to do this. And then that would have the final design that you would approve. It may or may not incorporate all of the things that were talked about here. There would be a lot of latitude to change it, but at the end of the day, you'd have a similar scope of project. Hopefully that sort of directs this, but this puts us in a really good place with the DRI so that we have a range of things, possibilities that we could do, an approximate cost, and that will allow the state and a commitment to getting it done that will allow the state to allocate the funding necessary to get it done.
Okay. So let me, Manny, excuse me, let me say this. If that is how this is being used, if that is how it's being used, then I would like a community garden presented by Dana White added to this. I'd like there to be some discussion of how parking will be considered for this, because these things take a life of their own. We have a youth bureau coming in. I think a lot of this is great and works well with it, although wasn't actually mentioned in this piece, which I think would be very important to present. Community gardens have proven over the past 20 years, this is not a tree hugger environment. This has been proven in cities like Detroit, places like Brooklyn, to be ultimately part of green social justice initiatives. It is great for families, and it's a part of an education system about the environment. And so I'd like that added in, because that was not in there. I'm very uncomfortable with being so specific as to things like gymnastics, which is something none of us have ever heard about before.
That would not necessarily be factor in
Okay,
what we
great.
would submit for the DRI. So
Fine.
these are concepts and ideas. What would factor in is the
Yes,
things we know. So first of all, we know we have to upgrade the entire facility. We know that we have to do the work in the pool area. The lighting has to be done. That's a Board of
Right.
Health requirement. We know that most of the things, if you look at the Nexus study that we want to do, we know we have to do in some way. Do we have to buy into that final design? Not necessarily, but most of that's, we
Great.
also know on the staff end that there are some things that we need to do from for the roof and for the infrastructure, and to Trustee Fritchie's comment that whatever we do, we have to make sure that there's probably, electrical upgrades or generator considerations.
and internet.
Those are the very general things that will be put into the DRI. Specifics, I don't think that we'll get into too many specifics in programming, but rather than say, we will now have a community center that will be better suited to incorporate certain types of programming. Does
So-
that make sense?
And did you add in the internet capacity, which we
Yeah,
talked-
so that's
Right.
part of the technology aspect. So there is some work to this concept, to this that we would use for the DRI proposal, which would really be more a tad more general in the utility. I think the goal of the DRI funding is to make sure that we have a community center that can be adaptable and easily transformable. If we decided that we wanted to specialize in a specific program, that would be maybe an additional budgetary concern. But certainly we could have gym space that could be dedicated to a variety of programs that we haven't even thought of yet. But that's a little bit of a difference. I think that what this, what Pat has done, and we have a lot of things going on at the same time, and we're trying to check a lot of boxes. So there is
Yes.
a bit of a confluence. What Pat's doing is really providing input that the Rec Advisory Board has made in recommendations based on what they see based on current usage and community interest and things like that. But there's
Yeah.
always more work that we have to do to refine those things.
Yeah, I got about 40% through the presentation when I realized you conflated a bunch of things into one in order to be more efficient, which is not a problem. It's just somewhere I realized that, which is not usually what we see. Manny, is there something you want to add?
Yeah,
And then
no, it was
on?
just pretty much, yeah, something along, what I wanted to reinforce what actually Karen was saying. To me, my understanding, obviously, this is a presentation that Pat is on behalf of the board, but this is not, to me, my understanding, and as always has been, that this project itself, sure, because we've been talking about the community center for years before before COVID, 2000, I want to say 2018, even prior to that as well. So we even allocated money for that. And as you recall, as a part of your advice was, security improvements, and we allocated $100,000 to that, and we did some of the improvements as well. So it's not something new. I think that my understanding for this portion of the DRI portion of it, it was just the infrastructure of the building itself.
Yeah,
we can do whatever we want with the program. Sure, Bill can come in at budget season and say, look, I have this great idea, this great program is working well, like he has done in the past, and this is how much money is going to come in, and we decide at that point if that's suitable or
I get
not.
that.
So
Yeah,
I think right now the presentation that Pat did, again, I'm supporter of that. Couple of things could be changed or modified. I don't know as we go along, but I think in portions of the next steps, and that's what I was. I'm glad that Karen clarified that the next steps is we have a shovel-ready project in a way. Sure, forget about the components. Is the infrastructure itself. That's forget about the addition.
Yeah,
we can decide that at some point. But I think this is a project. I'm in support of the project concept itself. So again, the components, the elements that we're putting in there, it comes later on.
sort of. Usually we say things and all of a sudden we see that they show up on drawings because that's what we discuss is what ends up being used. Then we have commentary at the back end and it's too late. So I just want to make sure this is done right.
We still have some time in the design portion where, we will make sure that, whatever the board agrees, it goes into that of the
No
next.
problem.
So that's all.
Got it. Bob, last
I just-
closing comment?
Yeah, you struck a chord with me. It was in my notes and I didn't say it. Parking.
Yeah.
That needs to be really looked into because
Exactly.
on a good day, parking's tough there. And we can't rely on that Leonard Street lot because, who knows what's happening there. Is there any thoughts of adding additional parking at the?
Well, that actually falls into
Hold on,
another project that we're working on.
No, that was
So I think we actually, maybe you just made the case for that we have to make with the state for DRI funding for offsetting parking if we develop in the Main Street lots, a stronger, more compelling argument because that parking would benefit any improvements and increased usage of the rec center as well, based on its location. And the value here is the state, and rightly so, doesn't want to build parking structures. They want to increase economic development and community benefits. But we've made a case saying that we have a lot of space that can be utilized a lot better, but because it takes away from some existing parking and because we had limited parking to begin with, we have this opportunity to consolidate parking in a really central area that would benefit all of these projects much more efficiently and effectively, and therefore be more of a catalyst than your ordinary parking garage would be. So this actually strengthens that case and potentially provides additional, avenues for resources beyond the DRI to make that sure that comes to fruition.
Yeah, but also, and I have to go back and look at the drawings because I think when Nexus did a presentation in Mayor, we actually, when we were on the site, we actually talked to them about that. And I know Paul was aware of that. And we were actually redesigning some of the stuff on the upper portion of the parking lot area in there. So it's not that we forgot about parking is actually, it is, my recollection is that it is part of this program itself, and we were aware of what
Yeah,
that
it
means.
just wasn't in this presentation.
No,
I
no,
don't-
no. Yeah, I understand
That's
that.
all, which is fine. We'll hear later about yet more stuff. Parking is a part almost of every, parking, like the environment, has become a part of the topic of everything that we're doing, because everything that you build out will bring more people. And that means there has to be something for mobility and for parking. Okay, folks, we're moving on. Thank you, Pat Yost.
Thank
Always
you for
nice
your
to
time,
see you.
everybody. And I'm
Thank
happy
you,
to
Bill.
have continuing discussions with anyone on this stuff. So
Always. Thank you for the invitation for further discussion. I know the EAC was supposed to present tonight. They're unable to. No big deal. We'll schedule that so public hears more about what they're doing as well. Thank you, folks. Karen, what's next?
Well, this is a perfect segue to talk about parking and parking spot designation on Croton Avenue and in the Quimby Street lot. And we'd like to make a couple of adjustments in those areas that would facilitate traffic flow in one instance and free up some more daytime parking spots down in the commuter lot. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our parking guru among her many talents, Assistant Village Manager, Maddi Zachacz.
Oh my God,
Wow,
Maddi,
thank you, Karen.
Maddi, you have just been titled. Good luck with that one.
All right. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Board. So there are, as Karen mentioned, there are two different things that we want to bring before you now. Back in February, I had sent out sort of like a matrix with our plans for the year in terms of parking. We are right on schedule. So having this conversation is going to lead us into early April, which is going to be another whole section of the conversation. But I'm excited to bring you a pretty short conversation tonight, hopefully short, about these two very specific locations. I'm going to share my screen. I pulled it up on Google Maps just so everybody has the context of exactly where we're talking about, though it should be pretty familiar to everybody. So the first stop is right here along Croton Avenue. You can see Walgreens in the distance, OVAC, we're along Croton Avenue here, Seatown Shopping Center. There are 3 parking spaces along Croton Avenue right here. They are, I believe, 1 hour parking. They have sort of an odd timing set. So all of our meters are 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. These are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I've been trying to do a little bit of historical digging about how these spots came to be. It's not entirely clear, but in speaking to Paul Fraioli, he and I have discussed why it might be a good idea to get rid of these 3 parking spots. If you were in the perspective of being behind this maroon truck here, and say that you just wanted to continue on Croton Avenue, at this time, because these parking spaces are sometimes occupied, you would have to wait behind this van, even if you were just staying on Croton Avenue, if he were planning to turn onto Dale. If this parking spot area here became a turning only lane with a right on red, it would appreciably help traffic flow in Croton Avenue, which I think this board has identified time and again, could probably use some assistance in that regard. So I will stop there before we move on to the next section and ask if anyone has any comments, questions, reservations.
I could not agree more. Great idea.
Get it done.
Get it done? Oh, okay,
Get it
cool.
done.
Yeah, and if there's any questions about where else patrons of these businesses can park, anyone who drives, through here regularly knows there are very often metered spots along this section here that are available, and there's also some street parking in the immediate vicinity.
What does that little alley thing lead to? What's behind
That's
that?
Palmer Place.
No, I
This
know
here?
what it is. Yeah.
That's Palmer Place.
Yeah, that's one house in there. They used to have
Three houses.
oh yes, I'm talking about the other alleyway. I was talking about the other alleyway. Yes, sorry. Yes,
Like here?
that's 3 houses. Yeah, I was talking about that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
So there's no parking back there. That actually
there is
leads-
parking in the back.
In the
Well,
back
for
of
the houses, not public
Oh
parking.
yes, yes, correct. Correct. Yeah.
Um, So having flipped through the code, it does not appear that the village, and Stuart will correct me, and perhaps the chief if I've just missed it. We don't really designate where there's metered parking and where there isn't, similar to a couple months ago when we got rid of the 3 spots that said 16 Croton Avenue. So really all that would be required is to inform DPW to remove the signage. It wouldn't need a change in code or local law, unless there's something I've missed, and I'll defer to Stuart on that.
So that becomes where there's moving vehicles, so no one should be parking there or double parking or doing anything, because they should be ticketed if they do. Is that correct?
That's correct. It'll now be a lane of traffic. It'll be a turning
Lane of
lane.
traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do get a lot of complaints about that area. It's literally the parking is in a lane of traffic.
So Maddi, can I ask you a quick question in that one? So when you do this, and maybe I missed it, can we do the arrows in there so people don't get confused and they still park in there? Like this lane goes to the left, this one goes to the right, that kind of stuff?
I think there's going to have to be a couple components to this. I mean, I think besides just the signage, there's going to have to be pretty obvious striping, at least at first, because my understanding from Paul is this has been this way for over a decade, potentially longer. So it's going to take a lot to change that habit for folks who are used to, using that lane to park. And, obviously this is something that, when Jamie and I were doing our ride around testing out the mobile app, this is something that we discussed. Should we even bother making this a section, or what do we want to do? But she has some great ideas about how, we can do social media and sort of push out the messaging that, effective, this date certain, you can't park here. And just take pictures of the different messaging and whatnot. So
great. I'm glad we're talking about that. Hopefully at some point I'm going to throw my 2 cents. We talked about humps around other local streets that we have, so we can help the pedestrian portion as well. So
okay.
I think it's also going to have to be the chief's son, right? I don't have a full gallery. I think it's also going to have to be in the first couple of weeks. There's going to have to be a police presence to move traffic along, because it's a habit of many years, and you can't blame people. They're not even going to notice, really. They're going to sit around going, "Wait, what are you talking about? I'm always park here." So I think there's going to have to be help from the police to be, not necessarily ticketing, but moving traffic along so that people understand it's basically a lane to be driving in.
Oh, if I may, the 3 that we eliminated by Elizabeth Street, I think has greatly improved traffic flow down there. This was number 2 on my list. Number 3 on my list, I know you don't have it on your schedule, I haven't brought it up, but if you go up, I don't know if you could take the map up to Sherwood Avenue and Croton Avenue.
We got a long way to go. Bear with me.
No, I know. But there's that whole string of parking there. And when there's cars parked in that first parking space on the, I'm going to say the west end, that's another space I think we could do without, because it's a very bad blind spot as a quality of life to come out of Sherwood Avenue.
Oh, I know just where you mean, outside of the the carpet giant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Even if we started with the first space closest to Sherwood Avenue, that would eliminate. I mean, it gives you a better line of sight for oncoming. I mean, we got a lot of places, but that's a busy road. I can't agree 125% more on the front of what you just showed us, but doesn't have to happen now. But it's another spot that I have for consideration. Eliminating spaces, because sometimes it's tenants that park there. All right, not so much the businesses.
Right.
Those rotate very regularly, those spaces. So it's not like if we take one space, it will definitely help anybody coming out of Sherwood Avenue, anybody. So just food for thought. But I agree with the other space. Paint it black tomorrow, put the arrows down the next day, and let's move forward. I'm in favor of moving forward with that.
I think I think that's great. What else? What you got?
We got one more for now. So the second one is train station parking. So if Clerk Donnelly and her staff were with us, she would echo this, as I'm sure Karen and other folks here in the manager's office we get a lot of phone calls about folks who perhaps were commuting to the city 5 days a week, or no longer commuting 5 days, but still need to go into the city. Sometimes by the time they get to the train station at say 8 o'clock in the morning, all of the pay by the day spots are taken by similar people in a similar position. So something that we had been discussing as part of the 2022 parking plan is to take over some of the commuter parking and turn it into pay by the day spaces for train station customers. And basically the way that we would do this without investing in additional infrastructure is by making this lot specifically, so we know where we are, right across from
Where
the
are we?
DPW site. Here's the DPW site.
Yeah,
Woo! Here's Westchester Collaborative Theater right down here. We're on
okay.
Water Street. So this is the Quimby Street lot. It is 36 spaces, I believe. And basically what we would do is tell folks you can park in here between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Doesn't matter what time you get there. Those are the only spots, the only times during which you're allowed to park. You got to be out by 8 p.m. and it's $4.75 a day. So that's the rate that Metro North charges on the other side of the tracks. So we would be competitive with them. And this would basically, continue to offer folks that option, just more of it, in case they, decide for whatever reason it's no longer practical for them to buy.
What is it now?
What is this now? This is for if you have a commuter tag. So if you go through the clerk's office and buy the annual train station parking pass. But anybody who's been over here in the last 2 years, I mean, the spots far closer to the tracks are the ones that are filling up. These are regularly empty.
We are getting a lot of people who are maybe going back, but on a much more reduced schedule. So maybe 1 day a week or a couple of days a week. They don't want to buy a monthly parking ticket. They'd rather pay by the day. That's a reasonable price. So we have been getting a lot of people asking for more daily parking, and that seems to be where the demand is growing right now.
So we figured, we are getting ready probably in the next 3 weeks to launch the Passport app. We're still waiting on the signage and the decals to show up. But anticipating this conversation, we actually built this into the app as a zone. Obviously, nothing's set in stone. They can build it and we don't have to use it. But basically what will happen is we'll add the same signage down here that we would in front of metered spots on Main Street that says the zone is 91402. You can park in here. Here's the rate. It would be app only, similar to the LAS spots that are owned by the train station that are on the other side of Quimby. And that's it. I mean, we basically would still be for, commuter parking, folks who want to pay by the day, only between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And then the lot would be clear at night. So what does that mean? The lot being cleared by 8 p.m. It could mean a couple of different things depending on how the board wants to structure it. It could either be empty at night the way that it is now. It could be used as an event space at night, or it could be used as a municipal lot at night. So we don't necessarily have to decide on that immediately, but as far as being able to offer this option to commuters is something that we've really been pressed to, and it's not it's reversible. So if we do it for 6 months and we decide nope, this is a bad idea, we've lost nothing except the cost of the sign. It's really something that can easily be put back in the bottle if the public or the board isn't happy with how it's progressed.
Oh, sorry, question. You wouldn't, if you wanted to park there during the day and you weren't taking the train in and you weren't a commuter, but you were doing something else around there, could you do that?
I don't see why not. I mean, it would be $4.75. You would have to be out of there by 8 p.m. But, other than that, it would be, no one's going to monitor and make sure you actually got on a train. I don't know how we would.
I'll stand and watch.
I think it's a good move. I commute every day, and within the past 5 to 6 months, I've noticed that the west parking lot is probably 50% right now. Where in the beginning, I worked all the way through COVID and commuted, and it was very sparse. Parking was very easy to find down there early in the morning. But I'm in favor of this. I think it makes a lot of sense. And what about the spaces on Central Avenue? Did you make that a zone?
We're not there yet. I have designs on Central Avenue for a downtown employee parking, but we have a couple other things we need to iron out in that neighborhood first.
So,
So that's part of the
The
April.
bottom of Central Avenue, where they're proposing, correct me if I'm wrong, where they're proposing their entrances to the parking structure for DPW site, that chips away at some of those spaces, correct? Not many, but those spaces along the road there they're all commuter slated.
Yep.
Yeah, so those are all commuter spaces on all of these, blocks going up the hill. But again, even in boom times, I think, it was unlikely that those would be filled during the day.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying we really can't know what that's going to look like till their building is done and parking structure is done. But, it should qualify as being another zone, just like maybe that zone or whatever, however you want to zone it.
Absolutely.
In the boom times, those would be filled or going all the way up.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, they would be, but not early in the morning. Like if you tried to find a parking spot
Yeah.
at like 11 a.m., those were
Right.
all filled. But now there's nothing like that. So I'm with Bob over time looking at those as well.
yeah. Did you do any financials on this? Because when we talked about all of the stuff we were going to do, it was based on this is what commuters pay and so you're losing whatever per day, because you're giving up 36 spots that normally we would be, I guess call it leasing to commuters, which we won't do anymore, right?
Well, maybe and maybe not. So say I live in the village and I used to go into the city 5 days a week. And so I paid my $450 a year. Now I come to the train station. I'm only commuting 2 days a week. I don't want to buy a pass because I don't want to spend $450. So I come today and I find there's no pay by the day space. Maybe I'm going to Croton. That doesn't necessarily incentivize me to buy a tag. So I think, at $4.75, it keeps it at the same rate as what other folks in the station are paying.
Right.
And we could always tweak that. So, putting it in the fee schedule, and then we can kind of play with it depending on what the market will bear. But
Yeah,
again, there's
that's
no
fine.
investment. Right now that lot is sitting fallow. Nobody is using it. And then additionally, I have my eyes on this area too. Folks are familiar with the other side of Quimby Street that we've recently been dealing with Metro North. These spaces are actually going to become village spaces. So we have another 21 spaces over here that we can make a separate zone and do something similar.
Okay.
So not recommending that today. We're going to see how the first 36 go. But again, since it doesn't appear like there's any local law that needs doing, all we need to do is have a resolution to set a fee for the parking. And then we'll be on our
I
way.
think that's fair. I'm in support of it. I did the math. It's 1,032, it looks like, if you were to rent it 5 days a week rather than buying a pass, but you have the option of the tag. 475 is, to my knowledge, one of the least expensive parking prices up and down from Yonkers up to Poughkeepsie. I
Absolutely.
didn't realize actually it was still so cheap, to be honest with you. If you don't want people having cars, you would actually change the pricing, but I think your idea of equitable, reasonable, that's like really, in this day and age, quite cheap. But it does give the opportunity to, which is the whole point of the app. The question will always be, and what happens if people don't have apps? So we're going to have to do a little bit more work and explain to people about the app and how it works, because it's all dependent on that. And if you don't have it, what are you supposed to do? It's not nothing, but we need to just figure that out, because we cannot, we've got to move forward and be able to do things that don't require people to sit around fixing mechanical meters and have, things, the meters break down, they're hard to fix, the parts are impossible to get, they're ugly, they get in the way of things, they make things immovable. When we want to do parklets, we have to think about meters. I mean, it just doesn't allow for any flexibility of doing anything outdoors when you have these things sticking out of the ground, just so you can collect quarters. So I like it. I'm just, I didn't know you were going down that way, so took me a few minutes to just think about it. I think everybody else's gut is right on. I think it's good, and I like the fact that there are times of the year where we may say, hey, we're doing some event and we're going to use that for something else and we're not charging, or, whatever we want to use it for, it allows for flexibility. So, and eventually we'll have 109 unit housing over there, affordable housing, which will also benefit from that. And we have an arts program that could benefit from it in the evening and all sorts of stuff. So I'm just running through like, what am I missing as far as the downside? I'm not seeing it even financially. So I think you guys did your homework. Thank you.
Can I ask a question in terms of nighttime use after 8?
Mhm.
Would it be possible for residents to use it? Because other people who live on Water Street, some of them are quite parking challenged. If they
Yeah.
don't have
Right.
a driveway.
So
was
that
thinking
was,
about it, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was thinking about that too, that it allows parking for people in that neighborhood.
Well,
Maybe
that's sort of
maybe they
why,
have a special tag or something.
that's sort of why we picked the hours that we did, because you want to do like a 12-hour swath. And so you want to try to capture people without going, too early, but you also don't want people out moving their cars very late at night. So that's why I thought 8 to 8 was probably a good window, at
Right.
least to try to start off. And then, yeah, if that's the will of the board to have it after 8 p.m., that becomes a muni lot. And so you can
But
go to the clerk's office.
isn't that
and
what
buy-
happens in the Metro North lot after like 8 p.m.? Anybody could park there too, right?
I'm a little unclear. I don't think there's any written rule about how that happens, and maybe that's something that the chief can speak to in terms of how it's enforced. But I think it wouldn't hurt to have a hard and fast rule about what you can and can't do, because it's a little unclear.
Good question that you brought up about that. I know on the west side, there's the parking, and that's controlled through, you go to the kiosk and you buy your ticket, and it registers your plate or whatever. So say I'm in that lot. I picked that lot. I go down to a hockey game. I took the train at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, do I have the capability through my app to extend my parking? You know what I'm saying? Because that could run in. That's what I'm saying. It's just for instance, I wouldn't park there anyways, but say I had to. All right, and that was the only parking I had. And I go down to the game. I'm not getting home till midnight.
Right.
How do I avoid getting a summons?
The other alternative is that we can make half of the parking lot or some portion that you have to clear out by 8 p.m. and then the other portion that it's just hour by hour. The reason that I put it the way that I did, and of course we can always edit this, is in order to keep cars moving. Because if you said, okay, you can pay, it's $1 an hour as long as you want to stay here, people are going to leave their cars there for 3 days when they go to Jersey or something like that for on the train. So to sort of incentivize turnover, we want to have a hard stop.
In reality, there should be a maximum. I'm giving you a ballpark. Usually, generally, if I took the train down to a game, I'm coming home at midnight. So I don't know what parameters you'd want to set. I'm just saying that could be a potential. What do we do?
Yeah, but in some ways, like you said, by then there'll be spots like there've always been in the larger lot. What I don't want happening is that people from Croton and Briarcliff and every other place, because they pay double today for daily parking. I don't want coming here and stuffing their cars in here so that our own people now don't have use of it. So I think that there's got to be a balance. And Maddi, you're going to have to think of some of the scenarios as Bob just described, but be realistic, because I don't know how many other spots are, but there's hundreds. Chief, what does happen when you park there at night? They don't ticket after a certain hour, or do you? I don't know. How does that work?
No parking anywhere in the village of Awning between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. unless there's a hardship exemption for it. So that includes the train station.
Okay.
I've got tickets on the west side coming home from the game.
Well, I think, we'll have to, think about it a little bit more. I think that the question though for the board as we investigate this.
I'm
further
sorry,
is-
Maddi, to interrupt, but it's still, I haven't parked down there in a while because there's been so much space, but Metro North actually in their own meter system, the daily ones, do have a few spots that are overnight, like for people who are parking, like, yes, there is. Are you going, no, there isn't though?
They do a minimum.
There's a few.
Metro
Right.
North, that's all hourly, Mayor.
It's all hourly.
Yes,
There's
it's
no
a
over.
12-hour
hourly.
max.
It's all hourly.
Okay, then I'll go down there. I haven't parked there in a while. There were like 4 or 5 spots where you could do more than 24 hours, but okay, I'm wrong. Anyway, you have to think about that and figure out the reality. It's not just the theory, but the reality of, are there enough spots, as there always been? Because you're just adding 36 spots doing this.
Right. So what they have for the pay by the day parking at the train station in Ossining right now is a 16-hour minimum. You pay $4.75, which is more or less exactly what we're proposing, except it's 12 hours. If you want to stay for 24 hours, you pay $7.50. Each additional 24-hour period is another $7.50. We don't enforce that parking, but my question for them would be, how do you move people out of spaces if they decide they want to stay there for a week? I don't really know how we would manage that. But the question that I think really needs to be asked before we sort of go down this trail is, does the board want some or all of that parking lot to be used as muni parking on evenings? Because if the answer is yes, then this is kind of a closed issue, because it's going to be hard to have both. So either it changes to muni at 8 p.m. and, late coming home hockey players just have to hope that, their car doesn't get ticketed,
Or they park in the other lots, yeah.
Or we can say it's 24-hour parking, and, folks who live in the neighborhood, you keep doing what you're doing now.
I like your proposal of 8 to 8. I think it also allows the Arts Center and others. And as we open the downtown for people to be guaranteed that there's some parking, it's reasonably priced. We'll have data points 6 months or 9 months and decide when we do the pricing during our budget time to see how it plays out. Once we see that it's not the exception that happened in COVID, but there is a new reality, and it allows future boards to make the same decision. But you start in one way. I don't like creating big and taking away. You go to 24 hours, then you have to take it away. Now you got people all bent out of shape. You start a little tighter and you open it up if you realize, hey, we could expand a little bit here and there. I think it isn't true that we can change our mind. It's really tough to do that.
I think I have an idea.
I just like your proposal is where
Yeah.
I'm coming out on this.
So just to wrap this up, another idea would be, if we started with the 12-hour and we find that it's successful, we could then go to this area of Quimby Street, the 21 spots, and say these are 24 hours, because those aren't directly next to really anything. This is really just train station parking. So maybe that's a good happy medium. Trustee Fritchie, does that make sense?
No, listen.
An idea.
To me, that's peak time. People parking down there. Really, in reality, you're gonna drive right by there every time, and you're gonna go to the lot, and then your overflow starts along the fence, heading north. Okay, then that's a hike right from there. That's like parking on Central Ed. That's a hike to get to the train. So, just my thought, do what you want with it. I don't think that's going to be an attractive area that's going to gain. You have no residents there, so you're not benefiting any residents over there at all. There isn't a resident in their right mind that would park there, unless that was offered to overflow of Westerly.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That, me personally, at night, we should be charging 3 Westerly with what they get away with constantly with their valet parking in our public lots or in the train station lots, and they should be directed that it should be all done. There's 21 spots, right? That should be there. We set up a fee schedule at budget time.
Bob, I'll second that motion.
Right, because they're habitual with this parking. They take over Westerly Road, and it's horrible. All right, so I would offer that to them, if however we can. Even if we can, and say, hey, listen, for a month it costs you this to use that. You can mark it as valet parking, do what you want, and then off days. I just don't see that ever getting. I don't know when this picture was taken. Maybe it was the St. Patty's Day parade, and we had a lot of people parking on the train station. I don't know.
When I go down on the weekends, that parking's always parked up. Whenever I go down,
It's definitely filled with it seems to be on weekends and evenings, the 3 Westerly crowd, that,
Right, 3
you know,
Westerly,
'cause-
and during the summer, it's the marina or the boathouse.
yeah.
Well, if that's the
if I
case,
can-
we can monetize it. If we
Excuse me
make
for
this-
one
That's what I
minute.
think we have to do.
Guys, if you don't mind, you guys continue the conversation if you want. Manny, can you take over for 5 minutes?
No problem, Mayor.
Thanks.
Okay, so we can put a pin in this part of the conversation, but I think I have pretty good marching orders to go forward with the other two. So thank you very much, and I will certainly give everybody an update when we have something to roll out.
Maddi, before you finish, I apologize. The proposal for the Quimby Street lot will require a change in local law. Okay, I just want the board to know that this is not where Karen can't just change this because all of the lots are referred to as tag parking. So if you're changing this, it has to be, I just want to make that clear. With regard to what was proposed on Croton Avenue, that can be a manager's change with regard to the code to just indicate that there is no parking along that particular portion of Croton Avenue. But with regard to the parking at the railroad station at the Quimby lot, I'm not sure which one of the A through J lots it is. I'd have to figure that one out, but that'll have to be changed.
So we could have a resolution probably next week or relatively soon for that, correct?
No,
Well, to call for the public hearing,
you
right?
got to call for the public
Right.
hearing. You got to draft and just Trustee Fritchie, so it's clear, that whole section, which is 250-30A1, is going to have to be changed because it's all references the section, block, and lot under our old SBLs. So everything is wrong. We don't even have these SBLs anymore. So
Okay.
all this will have to be revised. And the one particular lot you're talking about, Quimby, would have to be changed to essentially non-tag. And the question then, Maddi, I'd have to discuss with you is with regard to the spaces on Quimby near Wester, near the marina, those are ours, and Metro North has recognized they're ours. The question is how you're going to want those designated, but we can discuss that.
Thank
I
you.
just have, that also requires a revision to the contract with Metro North, which, is on the to-do list.
So in reality, a public hearing, yes. Now, I know we've done this before. We've opened up public hearing. Nobody's out there. We close it, and I'm presuming we could vote on that. You could read that resolution then. Or
You
during
could,
the agenda.
on April the 4th, you could have a motion to call for the public hearing. You could have the public hearing on the 18th, and theoretically, you could vote to approve it on the 18th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
All right,
Thank you,
thanks,
Stuart.
everybody. Thanks, Stuart.
sure.
Hey, thank you, Madam Parking Guru. Next up, Chief Sylvester is here to report on the first quarter of this year, his report on police reform.
Great, thanks, Karen. Maddi, can you share that list for me? So we have the list that's been touched up a handful of times now, so that we're working from the same place we've been, numbered out. So to go easily through this, the first 9 of them that you see there, those really all relate to Civilian Complaint Review Board. My name was placed on a handful of these, though they really were legislative work. So my input on those was merely advisory or contributing where I can, and each of those were designated on the internal spreadsheet that we had as all related to Local Law 1 of 2022. So while that's being addressed by the board, I understand that's with the board or being revised or whatever it is, that's going to be pending those changes, but out of my control. Numbers 10 and 11 goes on to the next page, or Maddi, if you can roll down on that one, I think it is.
Sorry, I was trying to zoom. I can't figure out
Yeah.
how to zoom.
All good.
All right.
No sweat. If you want to put 10 at the top of the page, because that's where I'm going to start from here. So 10 and 11 deal with, again, these are CCRB issues here. They deal with training. Insofar as the police department's responsibility from police reform, it was that we would provide all the training to the board. Or rather, I'm sorry, I misnumbered these by 1. So I was speaking to 1 to 8. These are 9 and 10 deal with training for CCRB. Our department is available to provide that training. I know that we did full training for the most recent member to come on. I'm not sure what training was provided to or requested by the CCRB other than that one member, but notwithstanding, our department is prepared and willing should the chair of the CCRB ask for that training. So prepared to comply with those things, though we don't order the training for them. So if there's anything to be done and we're notified of that, we will certainly get that done. So my list is off by one number here. So going to number 11. Number 11 is that we would make regular reports. So at some time ago, you may recall that I had worked on a significantly sized data study of arrests with regard to demographics in our community. We were advised by the district attorney's office that that information could not be released, and that was ran by the Corporation Counsel, who agreed with that opinion. So for now, that's been placed on hold, though we're continuing to look at different ways that we can share that information. So I've got some other sort of studies that I'm working on, trying to find ways to do that. We've shared some traffic numbers and things of that sort. Certainly not what the reform plan contemplated, but definitely a wrench in the works after probably a few hundred hours of work on a study of demographics to find out that we're not permitted to share that information. Number 12 then. Number 12 is put names and contacts of police personnel that are a lieutenant and above on the website. We put the entire department up there, so we went beyond what the request was there. Number 13 is that the village would support efforts at the county and state levels to reform indemnification. That is the Board of Trustees. That's outside of my purview. Going down to number 14, in order to increase transparency, better inform the public that the police department would have our policies posted online. That's been up on the website since I think before this was even published. So that's been done for quite some time. Number 15 was that we would adopt anti-bias or bias-free and anti-racist policing policies. I had reported that as done, but as I'm reviewing things today, I'm not certain that that policy is included in the uploaded version that's on the website. It's been published to the department and it's part of our orders, though I have to make sure with support services that we get that added on to the online version that's on the village's website. So maybe a small glitch in that one there, but notwithstanding, the bias-free and anti-racist policing policy has been in effect since about a week after this entire package was adopted. Police department to work with LGBTQ plus community to rewrite General Order 3.91 and expand on some of those policies. Detective Chavez spoke with him tonight, said he's had some conversations with Christina Picciano. They're continuing to work on that. He's been tasked with an awful lot of things, and quite frankly, I think that got sidetracked for a little bit, but he did say that they had spoken recently, and that's to be underway shortly. Department should modify its general orders to include that we will not respond with ICE. That was done from the day that this plan was adopted. Number 18 was that we would work with neighboring communities and nonprofits to develop a mental health, homeless, and substance abuse crisis response unit. So last time we spoke, Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health was undergoing an RFP process to identify vendors who would provide that service. That RFP was completed and awards were given to various agencies throughout Westchester County. Our catchment area includes Awning, Briarcliff, Croton, and the town of Mount Pleasant. When we last spoke with Department of Community Mental Health, they were trying to identify office space for those teams to operate out of. I had last reached out to the board, and Mayor Lieu and Trustee White had done a tour of the building, and we're considering your opinions on that. So I don't know where they're at with that, but we have not heard from Community Mental Health on where those units will be staged. Hopefully they can get that up and running soon. Number 19 was that we would work with nonprofit agencies to create a voluntary response registry. There's not been much movement on that one. That's going to be a difficult lift to try and add not only the crisis unit in at the same time as creating a separate volunteer service of residents. That's going to be a big lift. So we've kind of pushed that off for the time being, but something that we'll be working on. Crisis intervention training. That's been an interesting concept. So it is incredibly difficult to put an entire department through an entire evolution of training. And there's so many different things that were called for through this process. So there's lots of different things we're doing, but here's how we're pulling this off. 2 officers were sent to the FBI crisis intervention school that was offered a few weeks back. I talked about that in board meetings before. All of our officers going through the police academy now will get a full week of their version of crisis intervention training. There isn't one single standard crisis intervention training that exists. This comes in different forms through different groups in different ways. So we're trying to find lots of different schools to put officers in to get a variety of skills and strategies in. We just registered 2 officers for community resource officer training, which will be the first week of April at the Westchester County Police Academy, week-long school, which includes a couple of days of crisis intervention training, in addition to things like implicit bias and de-escalation and some other stuff like that. So we're going to be chipping away at that piece by piece. Other things that sort of similarly fall into crisis intervention, we're going to be putting the entire department through the Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health Diversion Dispatch training. So far, we've put 3 or 4 staff members through that. And essentially what that does is trains every one of our desk officers. So every police officer here at some point will work as a desk officer or dispatcher, some people may refer. And what the diversion program is a separate agency that'll be taking calls where it's exclusively a mental health crisis, and it won't be routed, it'll be routed away from the police department to that group. That training is for every member here to identify those types of things as they come in and be able to triage those calls. So again, it's another form of crisis intervention, this one trying to avoid the confrontation in the first place and have those calls handled directly by a crisis unit, or you know, at least be able to start it on the phone with them so they can decide what level of response it should be. That would be for every member of the department to go through that. So lots of different ways we're getting officers that content. Not everybody's going to be going to the exact same one. Number 21 was to develop a public awareness campaign in both English and Spanish to explain our role with respect to ICE. Detective Chavez has talked about it a bit on his page in Spanish. Since we've not had ICE here and not had any interaction with them, we haven't had a really great opportunity to talk about that. So it's something we have to do more of. We did publish that our policy was in effect once it came out. Probably more opportunity for conversation there. Number 22 is to get to a more robust website. We've added some content as we've gone. As things come in and we have more documents put up there, we'll certainly be adding to that website as it goes. Police department should implement or improve new and existing community policing efforts. So I thought if there was one thing we did well, it's that, but nonetheless, want to see more, we will bring more. So here's some things we're working on. Oh, I'm sorry, I want to go backwards one. The other training that we've placed applications for is Georgetown University has a program called ABLE. It's Active Bystanders for Law Enforcement. And what that is, it'll be a department-wide training for every officer here on strategies for intervening with your own coworkers. So in other words, you go on a call and you feel that another officer is using excessive force or something to that effect, or they're escalating a call rather than de-escalating a call. This is training for officers on how to intervene with another police officer active during the call for service. So then on to our community outreach type stuff, some things that we're doing. This year we started our, or late last year, we started our Chess with Chavez program. He's out doing that tonight. Other things that we're doing, he has started conversations with Feeding Westchester to do food distribution here at the police station, much the same as you see at some of the other places that do that. An opportunity for us not only to be helping get food out to the community, but also building those connections and making the police station a more trusting environment for people to visit. Hang on a second, I thought I wrote it on my pad here, but I had it on a different list. Talk about some of my other community outreach stuff we're doing. We have a meeting this week with the schools, and not to overpromise anything, but we will be returning the block parties this year. The intention is to have at least 2 of them. Maddi, don't make that face. We'll get to them. But yeah, we're looking to return the block parties. We're doing OPD in our schools, which is in lieu of doing things like kickball after school, which we very well may do when it gets warmer outside. The school has asked us to do things in the schools. We've had some significant challenges with the middle school is always a challenging place. The ages of 10 to 13 are just challenging ages. So that's where we've been focusing a lot of our energy. We've got great partnerships there with the school district, and that's where we're focusing a lot of our energy in our youth programs right now. So we're doing things like board games at lunchtime and pushing in on classrooms. We've had 2 or 3 different sessions where different police officers have pushed in at the high school on social studies and government classes, discussing things like police reform and the role of police in our community. My turn for that project will be Friday morning at Austin High School in Mr. North's class, where we'll be discussing police reform there. And I've got some really cool stuff with the schools that's going to be coming after that I'm just not ready to announce yet, but promise more to come. Also our bike days and everything else that Officer Hershowitz is putting together, because she's forever got a long list of things we're going to do. So it should be a good year for community outreach now that we're able to have more people together in outdoor spaces. And I've lost my place here now. So we were at outreach, which was number, save me, Maddie, what number are we at here? Website was 22, we talked about 23, so 24 is to create more training, better associations with different community groups and different demographics, particularly with the LGBTQ community, and getting together with the loft. Again, that's something that Detective Chavez, we gave him the lead on. He's having some conversations there. I had also mentioned when we first started this conversation, our interest in having the Gay Officers Action League of New York come and do some training. They're interested in forming, perhaps forming a chapter in Westchester, as they've seen quite a need for it among law enforcement here, and them having a great deal of experience in not only training police officers on how to deal with the public, but dealing with interactions within your department too, as we have more staff that fall into that demographic. So some good stuff there, and a lot of different agencies that can help with that. So more to come on all of that. Hiring and training. So hiring hiring is a complicated process, as you've seen. There's an immense attrition rate right now, not just in Ossining, but everywhere, with the number of candidates that are receiving canvas letters. We have canvas letters out now, and we'll see how many people respond. You know, our intention was not just to build on the demographics here in Ossining, because as you've heard me say before, increasing numbers in Ossining alone doesn't fix the problem. So we partnered with the Westchester County Chiefs of Police Association, where I'm the president. And last year we had scholarships for 100 students to take the police test. A number of those students, those scholarships were sponsored by the Westchester Hispanic Law Enforcement Association, the Guardians, which is the Black and African American Law Enforcement Association, New York Women in Law Enforcement. And we had worked with them to distribute those scholarships. I know that a handful of the candidates that took advantage of those scholarships were from Ossining. We did some advertising for that. Notwithstanding, the number of candidates available on this list is significantly lower than past years, and the number of candidates that are responding to canvas letters or responding and able to get through the processing section is making a real challenge for us. Notwithstanding, so far of the last 5 hires, 2 of them have been Spanish speaking. The intention in this next round of hiring is to hire at least 2 more police officers from the Spanish speaking list. The more Spanish speaking officers we have, the better, as that's a great need here in the community. And honestly, it's something that our own officers are asking for, is more Spanish speaking officers. But looking for officers of all the demographics that are underrepresented, whether it's Black or African American, women, Spanish speaking, it's all of these things that we need. But yeah, so we're going to keep working on that. We had some conversations yesterday about when we start scheduling the beginning of our recruiting for the next test. And, you know, my answer is that recruiting happens every day on the street, but our formal process is probably going to start 2 years in advance of the next test, because we just can't say enough to try and get people to see the value in the work that we're doing, and the reasons they should be taking this exam. So, you know, that'll speak to 25 and 26. 27 is the multi-year training plan. So again, going back to things that we're doing, the FBI crisis intervention program, the one at the academy, those officers at the academy are getting implicit bias. Our officers going to community resource officer school will be getting implicit bias, as well as de-escalation. The ABLE program that we're applying for, the 911 diversion program that we're applying for. And again, all of these things are in addition to our everyday training of first aid and CPR and legal updates and firearms and defensive tactics and scenario-based training, and all of these things that we're already doing. We've got to add all this extra training in there too. So squeezing a whole lot in for this year, and that's going to be the theme going forward, is that training has to be a major priority for the department. Number 28 dealt with the police academy. You know, we talked about this before. County chiefs are certainly making their recommendations on things that we need through the police academy. It is a larger conversation to be had with the New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services, because adding things to the police academy requires an additional length to the police academy, which is then an imposed cost on all of those agencies that are hiring, as well as getting through all of the committees that have to approve that. So I know that there are a whole lot of courses being recommended through DCJS that are added to the curriculum. It takes an awful lot of time. I find that the state tends to be a sort of slow moving machine. And the last one there is for the board. So that was for you to look at your working committee. So with that, I know I said a lot relatively quickly, but I will leave there and open for any questions.
Thank you. Before we do questions and comments, Maddi, look at the clock. This whole thing is being recorded. I think one of the things we should do with this entire update that was chock full of macro and micro information is actually create a video of it. It's being recorded anyway, so that in the update there would be a link so that anybody looking at this would get the most updated update from the chief as to the many things that have been done. Since it's difficult to update that kind of a spreadsheet with so much information and so much detail, it might be, if someone's interested, if you block out the clock. We can have a conversation now, but I wanted to say that. So when you hear me starting to talk, or when Jamie does it, you'll know exactly where to start. This part, people could see if they want to see the whole video. So that's a comment. I went on the website while the chief was talking. There's a ton of updates. I had wanted this matrix to be updated monthly at the end of the month. It hasn't been. Stuff, as he even pointed out, he'd already updated that wasn't updated on this list. I just want to bring it back. Maybe monthly is too much of a heavy lift. I think whoever on staff does it, maybe every other month, but I would like to put a date that you guys, Karen, can come back with and say, we will do it, on the 30th of these 6 months of the year, something, so that people have an expectation when they read something to know when it's been updated, because it seems unfair to all the people working, including the police, who have done a lot of work, and it should be reflected in the movement forward in these updates, because it's like a shame that work's being done but not accurately and timely updated, on this singular page. In fact, the entire police reform on the website is quite updated in so many ways, but it's not for us to discuss now, because that's not the point of the topic at hand. But I think that would be helpful, so that people looking at it, whether it's when Trustee Lopez wants to go to the police, to the advisory committee meeting, and Stuart's on there for, tomorrow night, so he could say, hey, updates have been done. And by the way, if you missed it last night, here's the 8-minute update or whatever from the chief, that you can hear in greater detail, things like that. So I just wanted to put that as a placeholder. And now, as just chief has said, does anybody have questions or comments?
Thanks, Chief. Helpful update. The only note that I would give is that in the last CCRB meeting, they did say that they were interested in kind of refresher training, but they haven't articulated exactly what they wanted training on or anything like that. But that's just a preview that is incoming. Beyond that, I appreciate the update.
Anybody else?
Thanks,
I'm
chief.
good.
That was great.
Thanks for the update. Sounds good.
Okay. I think the update is great. I think, the officers involved, the training, there isn't like, I don't know, green book of training in the US for police, for police officers. But I think all the things you mentioned, I think Georgetown, is that one of them that you mentioned, the program at Georgetown?
So what happens is there tends to be a lot of agencies that come out with the newest and latest and greatest and different training evolutions. And Georgetown University came out with this active bystanders for law enforcement training a few years ago. We saw the city of Yonkers go through it. I've seen a lot of programs come and go. I tend not to be first with a lot of these training evolutions because it'll be a one and done, and then we've spent an immense amount of money on it. I've now seen Yonkers and White Plains go through it and a couple of other smaller jobs. So now that it's got a foothold in the county, it's probably a good time for us to be able to go for that. So they do require community support for this. So we're collecting some of the documents we need. Some of it will come from the board. You'll get one of our officers will be reaching out to you about all that. But it does need support from the community so that the community knows that we're doing this.
Right, and I would suggest that you add that in writing also, because I think people not underestimate. I mean, I think we only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know, people just don't know. So this is super helpful. You look at a whole bunch of different training programs like we all do in our professional lives, in every industry, in every profession, there's lots and lots and lots of training going on, but you've chosen X, Y, and Z. I think it's very important for the update to say these are the ones that we're pursuing. Sure, people will say, why not this one? Why not that one? But you have your reasons, as you just stated. And I think the training is a big part that came up in conversations. And I think that the public will be actually, I don't want to use the word impressed, and I can't think of the right word, but the word is that thoughtfulness went into this. And here's some programs that we're doing, and this is how we're doing them. And for me, that's what's the most important thing, is that it's this continuous training that goes on for whatever the most up-to-date information is out there. You cannot do 100% of every police officer all the time. It's financially impossible. It's physically impossible. We have police officers, they're out there working. They can't be in classroom, all the time. So I think this is super helpful for me. I'm sure others would be very interested in it. So I would add that to the written information as well, especially on the training. There are links to these programs. People sit there, oh, okay, that's what this is about. Now I know. I think that this was probably one of the most in-depth updates that I've seen today. And I'm sure there'll be more, but it's great to start opening the doors, and that you guys are also going to be out in the community more. I know you work a lot with the school, so that was I think one of the concerns for some people who are not as aware of what we do, who come from communities where very little of this is done. So I think that was really helpful, at least for me, to sort of have you remind us of all the stuff you guys do with the schools, because for the past 2 years it's been a little bit weird with COVID and things we can do. So this was like terrific. I just wish that it would get updated on the website, where we keep sending the public to go look for information. The website has really become the index for everything. So I think that would just be helpful. Anybody else with questions or comments? I mean, I think this is really great stuff. I'm looking at the gallery, which is why you're seeing my face roam around. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Chief Sylvester. Omar, thank you. You're the liaison to a couple of police-related things, so I thank you. I know there are meetings. You too, Stuart, very involved in this entire process. Very grateful for that. We do have a chair in the committee, Jackie Shaw, and I know she's working to, do what we said we were going to do, which is move forward. All right, village manager. I think we're up to the next agenda item.
We are. Thank you, Mayor. Next up is we're going to continue our discussion on parking with a follow-up to a presentation that Assistant Village Manager Zachacz did a few weeks ago, responding to the board's questions about in lieu of a parking fund. And I just also want to say, because I know I'll forget, we're also going to add in just a brief update on Project Mover, which is tied to a grant we're doing to get some alternative transportation modes in there. So hopefully that our parking needs will evolve and change to be more sustainable and reflective of a non-single-use car society. So with that, I'll bring Maddi on and we can fill you in on in lieu of parking fund, and if the board wants to move forward, what the next steps would be.
Thank you, Karen. I just want to, I'm going to be switching screens a little bit on my end. So if my eyes are going all over the place, that's why. We had talked about, and I understand this has been talked about for a very, very long time, but one of the key recommendations in the Nelson Nygaard downtown mobility and parking study was to create an in lieu fee for parking. And just to refresh the board, any members of the public who might be following along, effectively, this would be a mechanism by which the Board of Trustees could continue to promote shared parking opportunities in the downtown and facilitate development without causing an undue burden on the current parking supply. So we had presented not just an idea about what this could potentially be, but also legislation from some of our neighboring communities that the Corporation Counsel's office had pulled together. And basically what I shared with the board in advance of this meeting and what we're going to go through is sort of sifting through those recommendations for what we feel is the best way to move forward for the Village of Awning. We've also been in discussions with Thomas Brown, who was the lead, he's the principal at Nelson Nygaard, who led the mobility and parking study, just to check in with him and see if he had any advice based on the draft provided. So I will speak to that a little bit as we go through, but I do want to share the screen for a very brief PowerPoint, just to basically guide our discussion. So the way that we have framed this is that we're really only talking about an in lieu fee for the downtown. As I discussed in my last presentation, there are 3 zoning districts in which a property currently can get a parking waiver. That's the Village Central, Station Plaza North, and the Neighborhood Commercial 2 zoning districts, all of which are pretty concentrated in the downtown neighborhood. So the first thing we need to do is really give the law the authority to decide when and how the in lieu fund can be used. So the definition that we came up with, and of course, I'm going to stop between slides so we can discuss each component so it's not overwhelming, where because of limitations of size, dimensions, or topography of a lot, or for other site-specific planning reasons, an applicant for new construction, change of use, expansion, or enlargement of the premises that requires additional off-street parking within, again, these same 3 zoning districts, VC, SPN, or NC2, believes it is impractical to comply with the requisite off-street parking spaces required, the applicant may seek approval from the Board of Trustees with mandatory review from the Planning Board to make payment in lieu of parking. So I guess we should stop there. The first question is, do we want to focus this only on properties in those zoning districts, or do we want to broaden it? And again, we've been going forward on the supposition that this is specific to downtown at this time. And we could certainly, create a separate in lieu fund if another opportunity in a different neighborhood arises in the future. But so to concentrate the resources in the neighborhood where they're being skipped, for lack of better, is what we're recommending at this time.
Maddi, do you have the map of these zones when you talked about the downtown itself?
I do. Hold on one second. I have it in the Prezi. Gotta open that up. Give me one moment. Yep, here we go. Okay.
Because the downtown and our downtown itself is a little bit different. So we always figure the downtown, it starts from Main Street, from Highland Avenue, Route 9, all the way down. Sure. So I want to make sure that we have that.
So yeah, this is, I'm kind of looking at it sideways. I'm terrible with this. So the Village Center district is this area in here, which is just above Route 9, Church Street, Main, St. Paul's, Academy.
Goes all the way to Broad Avenue, correct?
Well, I cut it off on the map, but yes, I think that is correct.
Yeah, the downtown itself, I believe it goes half of Broad Avenue, at least part of that, and at the border of State Street as well. So that's like 2 different districts.
Okay. And then Station Plaza North is this very tiny little area down here. And the Neighborhood Commercial 2, there's a little segment of it over here, Denny Street, and then this section coming up Croton Avenue. And again, the reason that these were selected is this is where you currently can get a parking waiver. So this can certainly be changed for the in lieu fee, but this is just a basis for starting off.
So refresh our memories. Usually a project that either asks for a variance for parking or a waiver for parking usually are not a 1 or 2 family homes, or not a 1 and 2 family projects. They usually is a commercial and a residential component to it, or just a strictly residential, correct?
I couldn't speak to the breakout, going back to what we got from the planning office. So again, in the last 3 years, the waivers were on these two sites. I don't believe Water Street has any residential, and this obviously doesn't have anything right now. I don't know what's in the hopper for that. And
It's
then
retail in the bottom and residential on top, but it doesn't understand. So it always has a commercial or retail component to it. It's not like a one family home that is on the sections that usually ask for a waiver. I haven't seen something like that of my recollection, but
Well,
usually it's a commercial space, sure.
yeah, these are the so those were the parking waivers. These are the variances. I'm not clear on what all of these would be. Bellevue and Camp Woods, I have a sense, are probably residential. But I'm not sure if commercial components are involved in those. I really don't know the answer to your question.
Yeah, but those are multi-families in a way. It's not a single family home. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess to answer your question, if we want to expand at this point, I would like to concentrate on these zones where we that we know that there's that we have seen the need of either a variance or a waiver. So that will be my 2 cents on this. But I will always like to hear from the rest of the board as well.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, Deputy Mayor, only the areas in which you currently could get a parking waiver, correct? Okay, so those 3 zoning districts. Thank you.
Just one question. Who controls whether they get the waiver or not?
This is another good point. So the way that I wrote it, and again, this is based on legislation that's around us at the county level, was that an application would be made either to the planning board and then reviewed by the board of trustees, or vice versa, to the board of trustees and then approved by the planning board. The one really meaningful comment that Nelson Nygaard had was, if that's how you want to do it, that there needs to be approval, that almost discourages folks from buying in. So just having the understanding that, if you want to make it something that they can do at their discretion, so long as they're in this, district and they follow the rules, they just get it no matter what. That's something that he says he sees more frequently. But again, we can set it up, most of the other communities don't have it like that. They have, you have to make application to the board, you have to, prove that you have a hardship, and then it, is reviewed by the planning board and so on. So we can set it up however the board sees fit. It's done in all kinds of ways.
See, I see it more like a special permit, just like any other special permit that comes in front of the board. Sure, there's a component, there's a need. There's times that by reducing the size of the units, because the parking waiver is based on how many units do you have and what is the need of that. So if they were to reduce the units, in some cases you may not need the parking waiver or variance for any of that case. So. I see it more like, when a developer comes in front of us is asking for a special permit, that is because they're asking for more apartments, as a bulk itself, so that's when that happens. So I'll be in favor of having this as that comes in front of the village board instead of going to the planning board. We already have. When we did the overlay, just keep that in mind. If they are in the downtown itself, in the lower part, they have to come in. If they want to add an extra story to their project, they have to come in front of us, just like they do for the special permit. So I think we'll be, I just don't see the downsides of doing that.
I agree with Manny, because I believe, Stuart, the planning board, there's a criteria that if they meet these criteria, they can get the waivers, correct? Stuart?
The way it's worded as of now is if the 4 criteria are met, they shall grant the
Right.
waiver.
So
There's no
they're going to
discussion.
do what they have laid out in front of them. Yet us, the board, who answers to our constituents, where this is an issue, with handing out waivers like they're M&Ms because they met the criteria. And we might have something else You know, I'm all in favor of us controlling or granting a, whatever you want to call it, special permit. I'm on board with Manny with that. I nothing against the planning board, but they meet the criteria and they all look at each other and go, well, they met the criteria. Okay, good. We give them the spaces. You know, you gave up 36 spaces in between 19 and 21, right? I think, is that what that said? A lot of spaces. You know, and that's all because, well, they met the criteria. You know, we might have a different outlook on this.
Right. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, we had sort of been looking at this as there would no longer be a parking waiver, right? So if you can't provide the parking, you must come before the village board and propose this buyout. There's no waiver any longer. Are
Right.
we all on the same page about that?
I agree with that.
I think they are. The question on the table is who's on first and who's on second. Do you want to go to one board or you want to go to the other one?
Okay,
And
so it
Manny,
sounds,
and Manny and Bob are suggesting the Board of Trustees. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yes, has the final say. I think if they go through the process and they've met the criteria and the planning board is okay with it, and then it's brought to us as we put the planning board together, or the manager does. So we should, I believe, wholeheartedly that we should control, and they could present their case as if the planning board was their lawyer. They can present their case and, well, they've met the 4 criteria. And then it comes to us and we go as the judge and say, okay, but it's going to cost you this. You know, which I don't even know if we've had a fee set on the first base. You know, I'm
Okay.
not worried about fees right now. I'm
I
just saying,
suspect that's the next question that Maddi will be asking us.
Right. I'm in favor. I agree with Manny 100%.
okay, I'm very sorry to belabor the point. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Would it go first to the planning board and then to the board of trustees, or directly to the board of trustees?
I'll defer to my senior member, deputy mayor.
I think Manny said to the Board of Trustees.
I
I'm
think
fine.
I think it's a little bit of a combination. Sure, usually an application like that, Maddi, and unfortunately, I guess Jaime is not here, but maybe Stuart, because I know you work on those boards a little bit, can help me out on this one. Usually, when an application comes, they have to go in front of the planning board. Sure, they have to, because they have to go through the process of the site plan approval and everything else. So I think it may be more like a combination of both. You know, they have to introduce the project to the planning board first. You know. And then depending on what they have, I think at some point they have to come in front of us, just like a special permit. They don't come in front of us for the special permit first, and then they go to the planning board. It usually goes to the planning board process, and then they come for a special permit in front of us. So I perceive this process to be very similar to that, unless it's something different that I'm not aware of.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fine. So basically the planning board would hear the application and would make a recommendation to the board of trustees. Okay, got it. Does anybody else have anything on that particular point? So we've decided what the process is, and we've decided it's only allowed in these 3 zones. Can we go forward?
Can I just ask a question? The current code has 4 factors to consider for a waiver. Maddi, and I apologize, I'm confused. Are those 4 factors coming out and it's now simply a straight special permit and the board, or are those 4 factors still there? And it's just going to go to the planning board to provide a recommendation for the, because if all it is the 4 factors are met, then you're still where you were before.
Right.
So I'm just trying to understand.
So this is the section, section 12. So my reading of this is that all 4 conditions have to be met.
Correct.
1, the change is from one permitted or conditional use to another. Okay. The second is the proposal does not involve construction of a new building or alterations, which result in an increase in growth. Like that's the section that I think is problematic. So if you were to remove the second condition here and change the wording on the first one, because basically we still want folks to be able to get a waiver if they're doing the same thing or lower lower parking requirement, right? Like, we don't want someone to have to go through the process of buying out spaces if they were already in a space that required 10 spaces and now it's 8. Why would we make them pay for 8 when they like, so does that answer the question? I know that probably not. I think that keeping the waiver in place as like a ministerial act of the planning board for conditions A with amendment, C and D would make sense, but anything where you're doing new construction or requiring more parking than the previous use would not be eligible for a waiver and would need to go through the special permit process.
I understand what you're saying. I want to make sure that the board members do, because that's it. And I apologize for this discussion here. That is in essence a two-tier process. You're going to have waiver in certain circumstances that's planning board, but you're going to have certain circumstances where it's going to be a BOT special
Right.
permit. I just want it, and pile on top of that, you'll still have the zoning board able to give variances. So you want to figure that in as well. Just, I'm trying to think 1 or 2 steps there, but I got it. I'm sort of putting it into my head. I'm just trying so that the board understands what the discussion is as well.
Well, the way I understand it, you go from 4 factors to 3 factors when somebody is building up and out than what you have today.
That's what I was trying to say. That sounds right to me. So if someone is doing a bigger use in the space, they would need to go through the whole, dog and pony show. If they're doing a lesser use that
Or the same,
less parking, or the same,
or lesser.
right? So again, then the 3 conditions would be the changes from one permitted or conditional use to another, and the change requires equivalent or lower quantities of parking. That was my add.
Right.
The
So then,
proposal does not result in the loss of existing on-street spaces, and the new use shall have access to the same parking that the old use did. So if all
Right.
those 3 conditions are met, then you're not adding any stress to the system. So the planning board would be able to, as a ministerial thing, just say, yes, that makes sense.
right, and then they come to the board if it's bigger and more.
Exactly.
You need more, and the option the board would have is to say no, or it would say, so go and reduce the number of units because no on the parking, and or you could do it but without the parking requirement, or you have to pay something in lieu of this. And now comes the question of what that would look like, but that's where we are at this moment. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So are we, do we have a foothold? Can we move on?
I think so. I think that now people do understand. So what's the second piece?
You're also, I just want to be clear, you're making it clear then that the zoning board cannot grant a variance in these 3 zones. Am I correct?
For parking.
I would say yes, because
Okay,
it's the
but your
same
code
process.
your code now does not say that. Just want to be clear. If someone came in and went to the zoning board in one of these 3 zones, the zoning board could grant them a variance. So if you want to take that from the zoning board, you're going to have to, it's going to have to be that would then have to be in the code as well.
Okay.
I understand. I just wanted to be clear.
No, I'm not being cute. It took me a little while as well, but now that the chips are falling into place, it actually makes sense. Maddi's line of reasoning makes sense. As presented, or the consultant's line of reasoning makes sense.
So the next section, this is kind of doubling back to what we were just discussing. Only properties within these areas are eligible. We already said check. The applicant shall make a one-time only payment to the village, the amount of which shall be as established in the fee schedule, which we would review every year. I think everybody liked that idea. And then only properties within the district that are eligible to pay in are allowed to get improvements out of the fund. So this is something that we will want to talk a little bit more about. If the hopeful use of the in lieu fund is to build and maintain parking in the downtown, and that's it, then this definition can stay as it is. If we also want to consider, and this could be an add-on later on, which would require a change to the local law, several years from now, also being able to invest that money in alternative mobility strategies, different kind of transportation, then obviously those would be things that would go outside of those zoning districts. So that's just something that the board would have to consider, now. My understanding is that the hope is that this funding, at least at this time, will be used to create more and better shared parking opportunities in the downtown, in which case this can stay exactly as it is, unless I've misunderstood.
But these 3 zones are smaller or subsets of the whole downtown. So if you wanted to build parking right outside, even contiguous to one of these zones, that would not work under this bullet point. It would have to be within those circles that you just
Maddi,
showed us on the map.
would you mind
back to
bringing
the
the
map?
map back again?
Yep.
Zoom
I
in
was
to that.
halfway there, sorry.
So, I mean, I think you have to make it like, let's say, the whole downtown, because let's say you want to use that money to make some really great thing. Let's look at the map. Contiguous to one of those. You wouldn't be able to, based on that bullet point.
It would need to be in this area here. So again, this is Croton Avenue.
Right.
It would need to be in this area here, which is the Village Central. So again, this is coming from the other side of Route 9.
Actually, it's almost the entire downtown on both
Yeah,
sides of
it
the main
is. It is.
street.
That's what I was gonna say. Could you
So
zoom
you-
in into the
you'd be
VC
good.
zone?
Could I zoom?
Well, just use your arrow so people see what you should have colored, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's this, it's the drawn in, it's almost everything downtown.
Right, right.
Well, yeah, isn't
The
it? Except for
VC
the T
is
zone.
here.
It's not the T zone, right?
Here,
Nope.
Yeah.
here.
You would, Mayor, I think to your question, you would by default be able to create the parking in the zone, where the zoning is, with probably getting too far away from that won't make it beneficial for the immediate use anyway.
I mean, it's almost, it's not the T zone, but it's almost everything, right?
Yep.
Okay. So then we have a couple more questions, and then we can talk about what
Right,
the next.
Maddi, but so I guess the question that you had is, do we want to utilize the money just for those areas right now, or do we want to expand? So I don't think we answered that question to you yet, correct?
I thought I heard yes, but I guess I misheard. Okay.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think
It's almost the whole downtown. I think
Yeah.
that's where it should, if you're taking money from there, you should put it back, because
yeah, and look, if a
over the
few,
next 10 years, you don't want to pull money out of the downtown and then do something somewhere else. It does, it should go back where it comes from.
correct, and that's what I was gonna say. I mean, this is not like the parkland fund, so is not that fund itself. This is very specific to those areas, and I think it should be utilized for those areas. Not just for parking, but I think for pedestrian portions of it, infrastructure itself, maybe within the streetscapes, things of that nature. I think it should not be just for parking at some point of time. That's just my 2 cents on that. But
Yeah, I mean, it could be defined, I think, a little wider. I just want to make sure it's downtown.
Okay. No, that's fine. I think that's perfect guidance.
Because maybe you want to have, we talked about Westerly before, or the next development, and you want a shuttle to something so that the parking is pushed out a little bit. You don't want to, I think the downtown, for me, any place is good enough, and wide enough and deep enough that it gives you the ability to be flexible over the next 10 years.
Okay.
Or
Do any of
20.
the other trustees have a comment, or can we move on to the next? Oh, okay. This should go a little bit faster. The fee is to be based on a review of labor supply costs and standards in other communities. So basically, how do we come up with what it takes to buy out a parking spot? And that's something that we're still working on. That's not necessarily my area of expertise, but I have calls into a couple of our neighboring communities about how they establish their rate and how frequently they change it and based on what. So hopefully we should be able to come up with a formula. And then again, the board would revisit that every year on budget season, as surely the labor and supply cost is going to be going up, at least for the foreseeable future. The next bullet we addressed. If we wanted to add village-wide mobility alternatives, it sounds like perhaps we're not ready for that just yet. We can sort of play around with the definition of how monies can be used based on the conversation we just had. Another thing that one of our neighboring communities had that I thought was pretty great, that I wanted to see if the board would like to be used here, is that instead of just building and maintaining parking, money in the in lieu fund could also be used for engineering and planning costs for designing new parking or something of that nature. So that's something I would recommend that we put in as being another potential use of that money. But if the board's preference is to have it really just be brick and mortar at this time, that's certainly common as well.
No, I would go for a little wider. I mean, some of the costs, the ongoing costs, cleaning, maintenance, maybe some technology's changed. If you define it only in brick and mortar, I feel like you're limiting yourself a little bit, because you decide, the sum board is going to decide how the money is used. It doesn't just get pulled out. How does the money get used? It's there, but does it have to be approved and somebody pulls the money out of the account?
I think similar to how in lieu of parkland funding is used by the village board, that typically you have to do a capital project with a budget adjustment attached to it, so it does have to be authorized. But yeah, the question is really, aside from just developing parking spots proper, would the board also like that money to be able to be used for planning studies, engineering studies about potentially expanding or changing parking, as opposed to just the construction and maintenance of?
I personally would be in favor of that, because the board will still decide during budget time, about how much the staff will have to come and say, we want to take, I don't know, $200,000 to do X, Y, and Z, and it's allowable under what the board in 2022 passed. So it's within those guidelines, and we're asking for it. And some board will say, yeah, I'd like to be used for study, for consulting, for looking into technology, for taking something down, for, whatever. I mean, it just seems logical to me. I'm not quite sure why I guess we're supposed to make the decision about it, but that's the whole package.
Will we be able to use, or can we direct this or make a decision that, say the big belly compactors are a big hit and they're being used, can we direct that money towards purchasing 2 more for downtown, Wi-Fi for downtown? Is that something, it's part of the downtown area?
I would think not, because it's not, I mean, it all depends on how the board wants to define the ILF, but that would probably not be something that would fall into the parameters. That would be something like if we did like a business improvement district or something like that. That's how a lot of communities fund those sort of improvements in their downtowns. This would really be parking and transportation specific. So either building a parking structure, restriping a parking lot, buying e-bikes or scooters or something like that, an electric shuttle, something that's really directly related to parking.
Yeah, and not only that, Bob, just keep in mind, we do have a fund for the downtown fund itself, sure, which is a total different entity, money-wise. So to me, will be, I agree with the mayor. I think all those elements should be as a part of this fund for them to be able to utilize in 10 years from now. If something happens and they want to expand, or they want to do repairs, or they want to do infrastructure stuff.
I hear you. I was just asking a question because it was
Yeah,
downtown.
yeah.
I get it.
And
I totally
it's
get it.
interesting that it's recommended that it be used within 10 years. Can you tell me why that's in there? All deposits must be spent in their entity within the 10 years, I guess, of when they're deposited, right? The clock starts ticking. And what's the reason for that?
Yeah, this is actually something none of our neighbors are doing, and I don't really much understand why. But basically, if all of us on this phone call, put in money to buy out of our parking commitments in downtown, and 10 years later, a different board is sitting on this call and they're saying, "Wow, we have the very first penny we generated is still in the fund." That wouldn't make people super happy that they were basically being taxed for something that then wasn't providing a benefit to the community. So it was recommended to us that we integrate something like this, whereas others have not, saying, number one, it's first in, first out. So if the mayor puts in the first $100, her $100 is the first one spent. Whereas if you don't spend it within 10 years, you have to give it back to the developer, because ostensibly you took their money and didn't hold up your end of the deal. So 10
We're not doing
years.
that, Maddi.
Sorry?
So we're not giving anything back. Well,
Yeah,
we'll find a way to spend that money.
This is just a recommendation, and the 10 years, 90 days, all that kind of stuff is completely arbitrary. That completely came from the weird spirals of my brain. But it is a recommendation from Nelson Nygaard that you do have some kind of rule about the order in which the money can be spent and how long you can sit on it, before you have to do something with it. Okay, and then the last thing, which is not included
Yeah,
on the
I don't think the
slide.
silence on this one is agreement. I just think we're thinking.
Okay, I
Well,
can't.
no,
see
I think you should go forward because it's something I think we need to think about. Like, we're not going to hold up this whole meeting. It's something interesting. I'd like to think a little about it. I already see a downside in it. So, and I don't want to keep talking. I mean, I just want to think about it and I can write you an email about my thoughts. I don't want to hold up the meeting with that unless I have questions. So I'm just saying silence doesn't always mean agreement. It sometimes means people want to think. That's all I'm saying.
So that's, I think, a good point. And this is, some things we do and we do one work session and we get to the resolution. Some things are more of an iterative process. And I think this falls into the latter category, but this is good direction to get us to the next level of refinement. And those, as you think about these things, it'll be easier to get through this and get to where we need to be.
So that being said, preliminary next steps can be one of two things. Either we continue to sort of craft this local law and have a couple more work sessions to really identify where we need to make changes and additions, and then begin the public hearing process. The alternative to that is to first enact a moratorium on parking waivers. So that would be in these three neighborhoods. The planning board would not be able to give parking waivers for the foreseeable future until such time as the board passed a local law about the in lieu fee. That process would still require a local law. So you'd still have to call for a public hearing on the moratorium on parking waivers and go through that, what's usually a 6-week process. But just basically to hold the status quo until such time as the board has had time to fully deliberate is what we are recommending, because it does sound like we still have quite a bit of work to do to tune this up.
Maddi, and so it will be just, so this portion in here, it won't also apply, like Stuart brought up, the zoning board to stop, not just the planning board to stop the waivers, but it will also stop the zoning board to give or provide variances for parking as well, correct?
In these districts, yes. Outside of these districts, the zoning board would be able to continue their on their merry way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I only had a problem with that last bullet. I don't like to start doing math equation and interest charges and then have somebody in the 9th year go, oh my gosh, we have $228,000 or $2.2 million. Got to spend it because it's year 9 and by year 10 we have to give it back. I find that whole thing to be a little bit odd and unnecessary. To me, it's an unnecessary piece of the equation. I see no upside to it. I mean, no upside or downside. I just don't see a need for it. So I'm a little stumbled by that. The rest seemed okay to me, in my one vote. And I think having a moratorium for 3 to 6 months, because I think that's what they usually do last, is approximately that time. You can't do moratoriums, for a long extended time. It's not fair to people. So I guess that's the only thing you're asking. Do you want to start moving on local law, or do you want to create a moratorium to work out details? Is that correct?
Mayor, that's exactly correct.
And the
Okay.
word moratorium makes me nervous. It just, I don't know, it feels like it's gonna obstruct progress a little bit, like, you know,
I believe, sorry, Maddi, Stuart, I believe last time we were talking about this. Did you mention that, existing projects that are right now in front of the planning board, zoning board, that they may be asking for either a zoning variance or a waiver? This process, if we say tomorrow, we're going to put a moratorium, will that affect those projects?
If there's not a final determination, and unless they get an exception, the answer is it would affect those projects.
yeah, I have a problem with that.
Well, you can
Affecting
craft the
projects that are
moratorium.
currently in the works.
You can craft the moratorium in such a way that projects that are currently pending before a land use board, or in this case, the planning board for waivers, would be exempted. So in other words, they could continue. You can certainly craft the moratorium any way you want. I just want you folks to be aware, a moratorium is a change to the zoning code. That then requires that it must first go to the planning board for a recommendation to come back to you for a public hearing. So like any change to the zoning code, there's that process that would have to be followed if you wanted to do that. You could do the two, in lockstep, but the moratorium is also a legislative change. It is an unlisted action it is a type 2 action under the Environmental Quality Review Act. So there's no environmental impact statement or anything like that that would be required for the moratorium. The parking waiver is a different issue, and turning it into a special permit and changing things around, that is not a type 2. At best, it would be an unlisted action, which would require, a lead agency and things like that, if in fact there was things like that. But we're not at that point. But you can craft the moratorium in the way that you want to do it. But again, it is a legislative change to the zoning code, even if it is just for 3 to 6 months.
I think this is the board can decide that executing the moratorium is a somewhat time consuming process in and of itself. Based on the direction that you gave tonight, if the board feels that it's going to take beyond that time that it would take the 6 weeks to impose the moratorium to sort of, get this in a more final draft law, I think that's what you're really looking at. And that would help decide whether you feel a moratorium's necessary or not.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, just so I understand what Stuart's saying, whatever's pending in front of a board, we would craft this moratorium around that to be however we want it. Is there, I guess in that moratorium, we could then say such and such a date, April 1st, we have this moratorium, let's say, and there's an application coming in. That application would be affected by that moratorium, correct? Am I understanding this correctly? After
Yes.
April 1st?
You could put a date, say that applications filed, on or after this date, or it would be subject to the moratorium. You could put that in. That is correct.
Okay, so the other side of that, I have an application in now, the end of March, and April 1st, moratorium takes effect, but they have not been scheduled with the planning board.
If you're, depending how you word it, if your application is with the board, if it's been submitted but has not yet been calendared, but if it's there and let's say it's a complete application, you should still be covered. What often happens when a municipality is considering a moratorium, particularly with regard to development, is you get a rush of applications before the effective date of that moratorium because people want to beat the clock.
Yeah,
So that's
my
what you could do
point.
here.
That's my point. Okay. All right. Something to think of.
Okay.
So does the board have a sense whether they would like us to pursue based on the direction that we have here on the next sort of draft iteration? Or would you prefer to us to move on establishing a moratorium?
So for me, I don't see a need for a moratorium. By the time we have a public hearing to any law and go through the process, and then we can keep the public hearing open for X number. I don't see, I don't see the advantage to the board in decisioning, which is, I think, the reason for moratoriums. So I'm curious, Maddi, am I missing something that you put that as an option? Had you not put it as an option, given the fact that we can keep the public piece open for 6 weeks, if we feel we had to, it would solve the same issue of us thinking it through. If we needed more time for things, or we're busy with other things, or is there something I'm missing? Because we could do that if more people wanted to have input or commentary or whatever. To me, moratoriums are oftentimes used for development when huge changes are occurring. I mean, big comprehensive plans, oftentimes when they're doing that, they put moratoriums because they want to sort of put a placeholder, bookends to a time frame so that things can be thought out and done, is the way I understand it. So, Maddi, am I missing something? And you've given us the option of a moratorium that you were thinking in your head that I'm missing?
No, and I'll defer to Stuart because he certainly understands the land use, process and timeline better. But the only reason would be is if the board were concerned that a giant development were about to happen in this particular neighborhood tomorrow, which I think it's unclear whether there's really a need for a moratorium, but that is something that we started talking about a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
When we started
Got
developing.
it.
So
Understood. All right, so unless I'm missing something, I personally don't see this process takes so much time to begin with. I'm not sure how much more we need this is an issue, which is parking. In lieu of parking, it's not about development. I was leaning, I mean, that to me is what I understand it to be, and we're gonna have to make some decisions about it, and we have tonight. I mean, I think we moved the ball down the field quite a bit here tonight, not all the way to the goalposts. And then deciding on the amounts, because you had that question, you didn't put it on this presentation. You're going to have to come up with some algorithms, explanations, which is what you said you'll do. We'll have thoughts of our own. I sometimes think it's good to have comps, and sometimes I think it's the blind leading the blind, so to speak. It works in both ways. So we'll have to be thinking about what's right for Austining. So that would be where I'm leaning, and I thank you for that. We need at least 3 people to agree on something so staff can move forward.
I'm going to agree with the mayor. I think we should move forward. I
Yeah.
think a moratorium is just redundancy at that within itself right now. So
All right, Dana said she doesn't like moratorium, so I'm going to take that also as agreement. And Bob, did you say me too in that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. Omar, any comments before we come to an end on this?
No.
Thank you, sir. So thank you. Is it guru or queen of parking? I don't remember what you're.
I'll take queen. Queen works.
Will you? Good. We'll put that in.
Empress.
Empress, yeah.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Goddess. of
Goddess.
parking.
Oh, yes, you guys are flattering me.
Parking
Yeah.
goddess.
Thank
You're
you.
right.
All right.
Get a cup
Okay,
of
I'm
coffee
sure
right
there'll be
now.
details here. I'm sure there'll be more questions. I'm sure all of that will happen. Okie dokie. And parking does come up on our tours and all of that, as it used to be taxation was the constant pushback, and now parking is the constant point of conversation. So we are ready to move on. Does this conclude?
Yeah,
the
so
agenda?
one more thing that we'd like to add while we have Maddi on screen
Oh, I'm
is
insane.
Yeah, I'd like to we have an update on Project Mover, and it's just something we want to make sure. This is a grant opportunity that would provide us with some alternative mobility. So maybe we won't need as much parking, hopefully, but we just needed to update the board and get this in front of you because things are starting to move fast on this grant opportunity.
Yep,
Okay,
this
you're
is
on
5
that.
minutes. I'm timing myself. Ready, go. Okay. So Project Mover is something we were approached by the consulting team who did our parking study at Nelson Nygaard. And they asked if they could write this grant for us. And we said, absolutely. So basically they came up with Project Mover. I'm going to breeze through the slides here, but basically, you know, we know that we have a mobility issue, particularly in downtown Ossining, but throughout the village. That's sort of, you know, that's why we're talking about the road diet. We're talking about connectivity between all parts of the village. And we identified e-bikes as a solution to traverse Ossining's hills and as a way to sort of incentivize not having to take a car everywhere, which has climate implications, but also cost implications. So NYSERDA was offering this grant program. It's a relatively new program for them. In summary, they're looking for folks to make improvements to their communities that get us closer to the climate leaders, the legislation that makes us not have any more greenhouse gas emissions in like the next 20 years. So we are one of 5 finalists to win a $7 million prize to implement e-bikes and agnostic charging stations in Ossining. So there are 4 other contestant projects and up to 3 will be awarded. So there's 3 prizes, only 5 people competing at this level. So we've got a pretty good chance. And we're in the electric mobility category. So very quickly, we want to make sure that every Ossining resident has access to an e-bike if and when we win this grant, which, you know, again, will make mobility possible for folks who don't want or can have the expense of owning a personal vehicle. It's also, you know, will help with recreation, helping people get back and forth from childcare, things of that nature. We have sort of integrated this into the DRI. So we're sharing information with the consultant team as they sort of hone their proposal. And basically they're working with us for the next couple of months to get to the final pitch is what they're calling it in June, where they're going to go before NYSERDA and give sort of a more detailed proposal of how they propose to help Ossining. So what it might look like. Free helmets and bike locks. That's pretty cool. Bike rider education and maintenance support. They're working with some of our community partners already to do outreach at some of the communities we're not as able to reach. So right now they're working with IFCA, they're working with the library, they're working with Neighbors Link, they're working with Hudson Link. They're working with a lot of different partners, and those partners who have nonprofit status will be paid for their time, which is another really huge thing. They're not just you know, giving us volunteer opportunities. We're thinking about a bike library. We're thinking about an affordable lease to own e-bike program. But one of the biggest parts is going to be the infrastructure that's going to be installed throughout the village. And they, you know, we're out with their scouts. They also got a chance to talk with Joe, Agustinelli, Paul, and Jaime about locations that might be appropriate. But basically, if you own your own e-bike, you can buy for, I think it's like $5, a little adapter that you put on your charger, so you can make use of these charging racks also, even if you don't have a village issued e-bike. So basically, we're looking to do a lot of outreach around this project, again, to sort of hone our proposal to get us closer to that $7 million prize. So there's going to be a couple pop-ups going on over the next couple of weeks, which is why it was important for us to get to you tonight. We also have an incubator. There are a couple other communities that are going to be following our progress. And if we win and they see fit to do exactly what we did, they get some money too, to launch it in their own communities. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, but basically the takeaway is that in the first 2 weeks of April, we're going to have 2 community outreach events. The details are still unfolding as we try to schedule around DRI, but one is going to be a virtual meeting that is likely going to be Monday, April 11th in the evening. And it's really just going to be an info session, talk about Project Mover, have folks talk about how they might like to use e-bikes, what model they think would work for them, whether it be a bike library, lease to own, or just like a city bike, just like a rack of bikes that you could take from place to place. And then we're looking to do an in-person event at the Ossining Public Library on Saturday, the 9th, which will have food catered by an Ossining business and where folks will be able to test drive an e-bike and see if it's something that makes sense for them and their household. So that is the entire thing. That's the pitch. So we just wanted to make sure that the board knew that this was happening. So far, this has not cost the village a dime. So we're really looking forward to this opportunity, and hopefully we can bring that $7 million prize to the village this summer. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple more minutes. So there's so many ways to look at this, and I presented it. I have met with the consultants. I took a morning, met with them. They come from they flew in from places like Estonia and Germany and across the country and all over the place. I was a little surprised, frankly. I assumed they were here, they lived here and were working remotely, and then told them, no, we're just flying in for this. This is not about bicycles. It's not even about e-bikes. It's about equity and social justice. And here's how that plays itself out. If you want to commute to a job in Manhattan, you have to own a car up and down the Hudson Valley. And then you have to park that car and it sits there. And then you have to pay to park that car and you have to pay insurance on that car. And unless you make a decent amount of money in jobs in Manhattan, your commuting costs vary from $5,000 to $8,000 after taxes. So for a job for 60, 70,000, it's most of the time not even worth it, because you got to have a second or third car that sits somewhere. If you could take an e-bike for 8 months out of the year in the terrain that we have, and if they can make this happen, they're going to replicate this across the United States. These are people that are doing private-public enterprise with some very high-tech startups that are global in nature, because they want to look at some test sites and not just New York City, okay? Not just, that's easy. They could do that. They don't need anybody for that. They call up Manhattan, they put it out there, they call up Los Angeles and say, let's do it. And they call up Boston and they're done. They're looking to spread this well beyond into communities and suburbs and all over the place, and frankly, all over the world. And they're already doing stuff in Northern Europe, which they've been very successful in. They are thinking much bigger, and we are a test site, as are some sister communities, because they want to talk about how people can live and play without cars. And inexpensively, because bikes are easy to store. If you live in apartments, you can have them. I have an e-bike. It doesn't weigh a heck of a lot, and I can plug it into a wall. And it takes me up the hills, and people of many ages. I mentioned this to someone, they started laughing and said, seriously, out of all the things you could spend money on, you're talking about bicycles? And the answer is, hell yeah, because there are more people probably in this planet who use bicycles than use cars. And this can be plugged into a wall, essentially, just like electric cars used to need all sorts of fancy gadgets. And now you can plug them into a regular wall. It takes a little longer, but you can do it. This is really about people being able to get to work in a cheaper way. It's about people who are able to shop for food, who live by the waterfront, but the nearest place is a quarter of a mile, but it's a quarter of a mile straight up a 45-degree angle hill. That they need to do some light groceries and they have more of a choice. This is about getting to Phelps from Ossining in an easy way, and parking in an easy way without having to own a $32,000 car that needs, $5,000 in gas for the year, and insurance, that's another $5,000 minimally. It's important, and it's important for people who can own one car but can't own a second car. It's important for people who need to visit their grandparents and take care of grandparents and just can pull up somewhere, park, do something, deliver something, medicine, whatever, and get home. This is really important. It's not about bicycles. It really isn't. It's so much bigger than that. And when you talk to these folks, you understand why we're not talking about a $7,000 grant. We're talking about a $7 million grant, and not just for this community. And this is why they're invested. And they're dealing with a few startups that are being supported by governments. So this is big. And Maddi, no offense, but when I presented it, I sort of got laughed at. So I just want to say that this is bigger than let's put in electric bikes. And I just want this board to really understand that. It's a big deal, and it's a big deal. It should be a big deal to all of us. Why aren't they going into affluent communities? Because in affluent communities, it's not such a big deal to own 2 cars and leave a third car sitting at some train station for 8 hours a day and pay insurance and gas on it, because they have the money. fine. That's why this is actually a big deal for so many people. And bikes are easier to ride. Now, I know we're going to get, well, if you're elderly, if you're this, if you're that, okay, it's not for everybody. It's not for 5-year-olds. I get it, but it's for a lot of people. So I just want to make it, I want to make sure that the messaging isn't about, we're spending all this time about bicycles. That's really what I have to, because it's pretty impressive. If we get this, and when we get it, we need to make sure people understand that this could be life-changing for some people who can't afford a second car and a better job and a better paying job, or to save money. And with the price of gas right now, it should be very obvious that it could mean something big to somebody, a job that pays more, that's 10 miles farther out than it is today. So, and I know it's only good for 8 months out of the year because it rains and snows and all that. We understand that, but 8 months is better than 0 months. So I'm just putting it out there, because when I presented it, I got laughed at. So I've gotten better at understanding the importance of it. I'm not
laughed at you?
shortchanging everything.
Laughed at you, Rika.
Let me at him. Who laughed at you?
What? My family members. Who the hell do you think laughs at me?
Oh,
You
wow.
think like important people laugh at me? No, actually, my daughters actually understood it because they looked up Maddi, the company. And believe it or not, I've actually been to Estonia and I've seen actually what they're doing there. Northern Europeans are very involved with the environment. It's part of their education system, but not the whole world. The whole world is not as educated about the environment in their public school systems as Northern Europeans are. So it's a little bit harder to sell. There's a whole status issues in parts of the world that people who ride bikes are poor and people who ride cars are rich. And it's a status, there's like a whole thing here. So I'm excited about it, but it wasn't just my family. I was actually with a group of people and they were basically telling me to shut up and stop talking about the village of Awning and move on. That's okay, because I try out my little speeches on other people. But anyway, I wanted to say that it's not, it's bigger than, it really is bigger than just bikes. That's all.
And but I'm trying to think, what about safety? I mean, you're sharing this crowded streets with cars and you can't go on the sidewalk, I imagine.
Yeah, that's another point. Sorry, I breezed through that just for the sake of time. But part of the $7 million also goes into potentially creating bike lanes. I know we, have some preferences about where we would and would not like those. So they have some plans about how to sort of go through some of the back roads for connections to improve safety and still, allow for those marks on the road and things like that.
And the thought of driving on Route 9 to Phelps on an electric bike terrifies me.
Right. That's for the electric shuttle. That's next.
But
it's funny.
But it wouldn't terrify you if you went a little bit longer and took the bike route that actually lands right in front of Phelps.
It's a bike route?
Yeah.
It's
a little bit out of the way because it's not obvious because you don't take cars to it, but you could use that. But the point of the 7 million is actually, as Maddi just said, it's not just, it's docking stations, and you may have missed it, which was important. Because I know she went fast, but I get excited about this. It is affordable bike, which means that if you can't afford the bike, not that they're so super expensive. I mean, I think mine was $700 and something, but for somebody that could be real money, right? They're actually going to do lease to own. So they're doing financing, they're doing the helmets. That's what she was saying. The docking, that's why we're talking about so much money, and they want to replicate this. Because there are governments in around the world that would like to have more of this, and not just for carbon footprint issues, but because it's economical. Universities, hospital, ways for staff to get to places of work, all sorts of stuff. So, yeah.
This will require rapid action by this board. It's something, Maddi, I just want to bring up. There will be some local legislation that will need to be approved, I believe, by June the 1st, along with a license agreement, because most of these charging stations will be on village-owned property. I am awaiting a receipt from the company of a draft local law, along with the locations where these stations are to be. They're probably going to provide more possible locations than where they will actually put them, because it may turn out, if they get the grant, that they would need to move these locations to different places depending upon use. But they would, I'm just so the board is aware, and when Maddi and I spoke with the gentleman last week, it will, once we get things, it will be a very tight timeline and a very quick turnaround in terms of legislation, because both the license agreement and the legislation must be essentially signed, sealed, and delivered in order to apply for the grant.
Because they need support from the municipality and the government to move this forward. They need total support. So anyway, and of course, anybody can call you, Maddi, and get more info, because they spend the day with you and Jamie, right?
Yeah, 2 days. I don't mean to give it short shrift, because Mayor, like you said,
it's just late in the evening. That's all.
It's a super important project, and it's going to be transformative for a lot of folks who live in our community and other Hudson River communities.
And as you said, there are 4 communities have already been chosen. I call them sister communities. I know that's not the appropriate name, but that to me is a more humanistic name. Where we succeed, they benefit as well, because they're automatically in the game, which is a smart thing to do. So you don't have to go from place to place to place. So depending who does win it, we hope it's us. There will be other communities that benefit from that. They become like, they keep their eye on us. Their government looks at us, and they start following as a template in unison, which is clever. They've been chosen as well. Those were the names that you saw in the presentation. And anybody should and can call Jamie and Maddi. Spent a couple of solid days with these folks doing their homework together. There's no match funding either, by the way. You didn't mention that. It's not only that taxpayers aren't paying for this, it's not a grant that we will then have to do match funding for.
That's correct. And it's creating some local jobs too. So that's
yes. Well, that's part of their whole social justice issue as companies. That's how the startup was actually chosen. It's part of their mission, actually. Again, please contact Maddi. She'll give you more of the info on it.
One thing the board should start to think about is, are there locations within the village where you do not want the electric bicycles to operate? That's one of the few things that you can affirmatively do under the vehicle and traffic law. You can't regulate a lot because Westchester County has not regulated anything, but you can regulate where. So if there are locations, that's just something to, so you have to, it's something to just keep in mind.
I don't know if we should just write you an email. For me, certain X feet from any bars would be one of the places. Like, I don't want people drinking and getting on these things.
Well, no, there's a whole provision in there on, well, it's really the streets you don't want it on. Not like you can't. So it's really where within the village you don't want. In other words, is there a street you don't want it operated on because it's a heavy traffic or something like that? That's something that the municipality, the village, does have the ability.
Oh, I see. I thought you could do it like we were thinking, from a zoning, like 1,000 or 250 feet from a bar or whatever. But you're saying actual streets. Okay.
Yeah, they have geofencing so that it's controlled by GPS. So if you go outside the boundaries where you're allowed to operate it, it'll either slow down the speed, so now you can only go 5 miles an hour, or it'll stop the wheels entirely, so you can't.
Right. There's a whole thing about data and how they collect data on these things that we're not getting into. Okay, so we'll think about that as well. Maybe Route 9 may not be the ideal, but who knows? Maybe it is ideal. We don't know yet. Okay.
All right.
What do we need to do tonight?
Oh, Trustee Quesada, were you
Yeah,
going to say
no,
something?
that's exactly. No, I was going to ask, like what the mayor said. What do we need to do tonight?
Nothing.
Okay.
Just what Stuart said. Keep your eyes peeled and be ready to pedal fast.
Right, because they also weren't originally going to present this, I don't think, right? But because we didn't do the EAC, they took the opportunity to add this on. Okay.
So we have 2 more items. One is a cabaret license request for Serenita Lounge and an awning sign application for 2325 Spring Street. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan and the Chief of Police for the license request, and then Stuart will follow up with the awning and sign application as well.
And Maddi, if you're still there, I believe Mr. Collado is in the other room, to come over.
Yep.
He is the proprietor of Serenita Lounge. And Chief, thanks for coming back. Folks, this is, if you want to call it a renewed application, the board in January denied the application of Serenita Lounge. Based upon, in part, the number of calls to the location and the information provided by OPD. As there is no provision in the code that says that the party cannot reapply or has to basically sit on the sidelines for a period of time, they reapplied. As I indicated in my email to the board on Monday, I did receive a call from the owner of 12 Croton Avenue indicating that he was looking to get the tenant who was making most of the calls out and moving Mr. Collado into that apartment. I did want to find out from the police basically how many of the calls were related to the apartments versus how many of the calls related to the bar. And I've given you the information I got from Lieutenant Donahue, which is of the blotter list provided at the time of the request. Only a carbon monoxide alarm and a vehicle repossession could be attributed to anyone but the bar itself. The noise complaints invariably acknowledge loud music and/or DJ and the establishment being ordered to lower the music. Were the call unfounded, this would typically be noted. And then I looked at the 80 calls on the blotter up to March 8th of this year, and only 5 were listed as unfounded. I also related to you that the tenant, who is the subject now of an eviction proceeding, did submit a complaint to the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council. That complaint is being reviewed. But he indicated, and this is Mr. Mazo, indicated in his complaint that music is blasting loud at all times, that effectively he has been offered $3,000 by the building owner to get out, and he said no. So there is an eviction proceeding pending. That's separate, but I think it does sort of play into what's going on here. But essentially, we still have the complaints. Most of those complaints appear to relate directly to the bar. While it is true that most of the complaints appear to be calls from tenants in the building, they're not because of problems in the building. They're with regard to complaints at the bar. And that was confirmed by the email from Lieutenant Donahue. That's where it is. Chief, I didn't know if you had anything additional to add.
No, nothing has changed since last time. Eliminating the person with the opportunity to complain about you doesn't change your behavior. Officers are frustrated with what they find there on a regular basis. Beyond the issues of noise, I believe we've had at least 2 opportunities that we've issued summonses, or at least one issue where a summons has been issued, but more than once that we found them with hookahs inside. Even after speaking with them multiple times, there does not appear to be a lot of compliance here. And, the police department doesn't ordinarily make recommendations on these things. We simply provide data. Notwithstanding, there does not appear to be a long history of compliance here. There has not been a big effort to get along. Mr. Mazzo was in headquarters today on a separate issue and stated that he has no intention of leaving there. So I understand that that's a civil proceeding that has to be dealt with in the courts, but it does not appear that he wishes to leave. So irrespective of what the landlord would like to do, I don't think that's necessarily relevant to the conversation tonight for purposes of who may be available to make complaints in the future. Please consider, though, that by denying a cabaret license, that merely eliminates the opportunity for live performance of music. The music that we're getting complaints about here is not live music. It's recorded music that's played, which is within the law to do, and still too noisy. So what they're asking for is to go beyond the mechanism they've already used to cause noise complaints and have a different way of creating music.
Thank you. Who's the landlord?
A gentleman by the name of David Abrams. I don't have the precise name of his company, but Mr. Abrams was the person who reached out to me.
Okay. Does the board have, I mean, I'll speak last. Anybody have any comments?
Someone has their hand up in the,
Yeah,
would be-
Mr. Collado has his hand raised. I'm not sure if the board wants to entertain that since it's a work session.
It's a work session. I didn't invite the gentleman. I want to hear from the board first, and then we can hear from him.
well, it kind of, I mean, they're evicting the person who has been complaining?
Well,
Okay,
let's just to be clear, the building owner, this is not the tenant is doing the eviction. That's the building owner. I just, no, I don't want to parse it, but it's important to remember that the applicant is a tenant in the building. It is the owner who is bringing an eviction proceeding against the residential tenant in the building.
so
that
does
is-
that apply to what we're doing tonight or not? Because it doesn't sound like anything has changed otherwise.
As the chief has said, the complaints are still there, and in fact, it doesn't affect it would affect the live music that would be played pursuant to the cabaret license, but not, the fact that there are other complaints just because they're playing music loudly, which seems to be many of the complaints that occur to this location.
Okay.
So we're here for a cabaret license, not a tenant issue. Right?
Correct.
Not a tenant issue. So I don't
That's
really know
correct.
what the tenant's doing, who's getting evicted, don't matter to me. Nothing's changed. My decision hasn't changed.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, you want to hear what Mr. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce,
Collado.
Pilato, what Mr.
Yes.
Pilato has to say. It's a work session, it's not required, so. I'm safe in asking.
We usually do listen to applicants when they come in front
Fine.
of us when something like this happens, believe. So I will be curious to see, even though when it's
Okay.
mindset as Bob, so, but I will love
That's
to.
fine.
Okay,
That's fine.
Mr.
Can you
Collado,
bring
I'm
him over,
going
please?
to bring you
Yeah.
over. If you could unmute and turn your camera on. Okay, Mr. Collado, if you could turn your camera on and unmute. Okay, we can see you.
It's not the same person we saw last time, is it?
That was for a different place, Mayor.
I can't see him. I think his.
Yes,
Can you move your screen a little bit, sir?
they can hear me?
There you go. We can hear you. You just need to move your, there we go. Thank you. Okay, what is it that you would like to
Hi.
report on?
Thank you, my name. Thank you, my name is Amaury Collado. I'm the owner property in 12 Croton Avenue, Austin, in New York, Sirenita Sport Bar. I got this situation like for 2 or 1 years about music for the tenant living upstairs. I tried to fix this problem when the landlord, and I'm gonna get it, this apartment, and I think about it, that's the only solution that I got to do it. I don't have any complaint around to the property because this is a commercial places. It's nothing around, it's no people living around to the bar. The only complaint that I got is in the second floor. and I try to fix it, this problem. About the chief, the police, they say I got hookah. Yes, we got hookahs in couple of months ago. I don't have hookah no more. I don't know even the hookah is illegal in Westchester County. Now I take it off all the hookahs. I need the opportunity to get my license back because that's the first time they negated my license. And please, if I doing something wrong, I apologize. I want to do the best that I can, and I'm gonna change everything because I want to work with the police department and the village. I don't want to cause problems, any problems in the area. I'm part from the community, and I want to be right. I want to, this business is my support for my family and support for a lot of employers that I got here. And if you give me the opportunity, I'm going to change everything that I can do it.
Okay.
And thank you so much. And thank you so much for the opportunity for letting me talk to in this table.
Right. You're not the owner of the building. You are the owner of the business, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a business that you own. You
I
did
can-
not, it's not a declination of your license. I don't need to see that. It's not a declination of your license. You are asking for hours for a cabaret license, which is, as the chief said, live music. So it is not your entire business that anybody is taking away from you. And there are people living around this bar. You're in a mixed use area, not just commercial, but in fact, there are a number of people that live within very close proximity to your bar. We all live in this community, so we drive by your place all the time. We all know it. We all know everything because we all live here. Everybody in this gallery that you're looking at are residents of Awning. So I think Trustee Fritchie already stated his opinion. It isn't, in my opinion, sir, it isn't one tenant. It is a number of people that have complained, and it is on a regular basis, which is why this board declined your request for a cabaret, and it was just a couple of months ago, not even. For me, first you fix all the problems, then you have a business that respects the residents that live in this community, in the area of your bar, from inside your bar to outside your bar. And when you do that, at least from my perspective, while there's no law that says how many months, for me would have to be no less than the next 6 months. Once we see that improvements are made and the police also will have input into that, then from my perspective and my singular vote as mayor, I might consider to hear your position again. I will tell you personally that I am not going to be listening to the input until we see some changes. We don't decline these cabaret licenses very often, sir. It takes a lot for us to decline, but I think that the board has reached a point where we need to see that our businesses respect the community that they do business in as much as they want the community to respect their ability to do business. It's a two-way relationship, not a one-way relationship. And so we appreciate that you employ people in our community, and we appreciate that you're a member of the community, and we would like to see you present yourself as a member of the community in a more respectful way to the community, in which you also make a living in, not just employ, but you also make a living in. The issue of the tenant, from my perspective, is similar to Trustee Fritchie. For me personally, that will have to be settled in court, but my information, and that's what I use to make decision personally, is that it is not an individual, but rather a number of scenarios, which has brought us to this conversation. So nothing that's been said here has changed my mind or my vote. And I am in support with Trustee Fritchie that I'm going to stay with the decision that I voted on previously. If anybody else would like to add any commentary, this would be the time, or have any question for Mr. Collado, and apologies in advance if I mispronounce your name, sir. Manny, is that you taking off the mute? I can't see.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Mayor. And yeah, I want to echo what you said, and I think my recommendation to Mr. Collado, sorry, it will be, if you can always come back, you can always reapply, but I think if the next time that you come back, you have to, from now on to then into the future, not just the temporary fix, but I think you need to work with our police department, follow the rules and regulations. The meeting that you had today with our police department, I think it will help you to map up the next steps that you need to do. And until we don't see an improvement, I don't think we can help you with this. Not that we want to hurt your business, because I think any local business is part of our village, is part of our community, and we want to help them, but we cannot accept that kind of behavior from some of the local businesses that we have. So that's the reason why I will stand the decision that we took a few months, about not even 2 months ago. So.
I just want to clarify that this is not the gentleman we met with today. We met with the resident that lives upstairs.
Okay, I apologize, Chief, I misunderstood. So thank you. So if you were to meet with the police department and work on the issues that you are having, I think that will beneficial. It will be benefit to what you want to accomplish in months from now on. So thank you, Chief, for clarifying that. I apologize.
I couldn't get my unmute quickly enough. Thank you, Chief Sylvester. Anybody else have any comments on this?
I can go quickly. Señor Collado, ¿prefiere que yo le hablo en español?
Sí, por favor.
Okay. I'll talk to him in Spanish and then I'll translate. Ya mi compañero aquí le han dicho básicamente lo que yo siento también, pero lo importante de saber es que nosotros ahora mismo, en este año en particular, tenemos un enfoque en la calidad de vida aquí en el pueblo. Lo que tiene que ver con la basura, con el ruido, con todas las cosas que pueden hacer que la calidad de la vida sea peor, nosotros estamos tratando de mejorar. Y una de las cosas que la gente se han quejado, no es su negocio específicamente, pero en muchos de los negocios que tienen que ver con música o cualquier cosa es de bulla, de cuando viene la policía porque hay peleas, diferentes cosas así. Entonces nosotros hemos puesto límites en la música en vivo para todos los negocios. Para que no sea demasiado tarde, especialmente en los días que la gente trabaja en el próximo día. Entonces, lo que dijo mi compañero, el señor Quesada aquí, yo estoy de acuerdo 100%, que es, lo que estamos buscando es que usted nos enseñe un poco de progreso cuando viene con la queja que viene de la policía, eso de la bulla, cualquier otra cosa, y el chief puede ayudarle para decirle específicamente lo que está buscando que cambie. Pero queremos que no vea a nosotros como parte de su negocio, que le queremos ayudar. Es importante que tengamos negocios que estén haciendo muy bien aquí en el pueblo, porque eso es parte de la fábrica de lo que nos hace seguir adelante. A la misma vez tenemos que también ponerle atención a las personas que nos están diciendo que tienen quejas sobre la calidad de vida. Entonces, quería que usted supiera esa perspectiva que nosotros tenemos aquí.
Yo entiendo y te puedo hablar algo en español.
Sí, dame un segundito para traducir, entonces me puedes responder. What I told him basically was one of the perspectives, building on what you, Mayor, and Deputy Mayor have said, is that we've been working on quality of life issues in general, particularly over the course of this year, noise complaints, garbage, all sorts of stuff, in order to make the quality of life higher in the village. And so we're balancing the interests of wanting to support businesses of all kinds, small, medium, large, but also addressing these quality of life issues. And so what we want him to do is to work with the chief and with the police in order to address what are the complaints, the source of the complaints, for those to go down over time and be able to support him with this endeavor. Señor.
Desde que ya me han negado la licencia, yo he cambiado todo aquí. A mí se me ha ido la mitad de los costos. Se me ha ido todo. O sea, prácticamente donde estaba estoy menos. Porque yo lo he cambiado. Porque que yo no quiero seguir que siga lo que ustedes están diciendo. Voz, mucho de control. Yo le he bajado bastante y mi negocio ha bajado bastante. Pero yo lo que quiero es trabajar tranquilo, tener mi papel en orden y estar bien con todo. Y si yo tengo que ir allá a hablar con el de la policía, que me siga, que me dé más instrucciones, pues yo voy ahí y lo he intentado ir. No me han dado la oportunidad de ir a hablar con ellos. Me gustaría que tú se lo dijeras, que me gustaría ir allá a hablar con él, porque yo lo que quiero es tener todo mi papel en orden y ser parte de la ciudad.
Sí, yo entiendo
Gracias,
eso.
eso.
No, de nada. Basically, what he said there was that he's made changes over the last period of time, and since then he's seen his customer base go down, and so that's affected his business. But he is interested in working with the police and the chief in order to move things forward, and would like our help in doing that. Entonces, usted tiene nuestro apoyo aquí. Yo sé que la puerta de la policía está abierta para poder trabajar con usted. Y en unos 6, como dijo mi compañero Manuel, en unos 6 meses puede volver demostrar los cambios que nosotros podemos ver, entonces podemos tener la conversación de nuevo.
¿En cuánto tiempo?
Como yo diría como en 6 meses.
What is 6 meses? 6 months?
6 months, yeah. He's asking like, when should I come back?
Right, no, I got that part. Okay.
Yeah.
So in 6 months, yeah. We have to do things that make sense, the businesses and for all concerned, and that's the key. So in about 6 months, if we see some improvement, marked improvement, we will be hearing from you, sir. Otherwise, for now, we are staying with our decision. And we appreciate you coming and speaking with us. And I believe that Trustee Lopez and I think the rest have said it would make sense to work with the police in making sure that these things are accomplished. And we thank you for coming here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, village manager, what else do we have?
Just we have Corporation Counsel with an awning permit application.
Right.
Awning application.
Thank you, folks. This was recently received. It's with regard to 2325 Spring Street and the corner around Maple Place. There are already 5 awnings up. Those are going to be basically replaced, and there'll be 2 awnings above the storefront, not the storefront, but the entrance along Maple Place. The awning permit is required because the awnings will be over the village sidewalk, village right of way. The sign permit will be dealt with by the building department, but I've sent you a copy of the application along with the sheets indicating where the awnings will be located and what they will be looking like. They're blue awnings. Some will have numbers, letters on them. Neighbors Link is there. There's a salon there, some other businesses along that stretch. And so this is just an application for the board to authorize the awnings to be placed. And as I said, then the sign permit would go through its regular process in the building department.
Okay. So in fairness, I did not go to look by there. I'm sort of envisioning that there are awnings, they're coming down, new ones are going up. They're already, the ones that exist are already on our part over our property, I would assume.
Yes.
Do you want the
So-
screen shared, Mayor?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the thing.
I can do it. Give me one moment.
Yeah. But I think if it's really a replacement, it's only in front of us because it
they're
goes over the
greens.
property.
Yeah, they're green awnings right now. There's about 3 of them in the front. Not in all the storefronts, but there's at least 3.
All right, so.
My
if we're-
understanding is that Neighbors Link actually acquired the entire building. So now they're going to be operating out of the ground floor as well.
The names on this awning and the awning application, it says Aguila Multi-Service.
Yeah, it's not the entire building. It's just
Oh, okay.
where the Christian reading room
Ah,
used to be. It's that part. So they have where they currently are, and then that additional piece.
all right. Owning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And
There's
now
7
Corner
total.
Going to be a
Spring,
total of 7,
1, 2, 3, 4, and they're all gonna be similar.
similar
Because,
color, correct.
okey dokey. Got it. All righty. Okay,
Everyone is
anybody have
okay
any
with-
comments? I have no problem with it, but I'm probably missing something. Anybody have any issues with this?
No, I think they're fine.
They
where
all
they
look
are. At
the
least they're all,
same,
yeah. They're all the same color, so I think I like that.
consistent, yeah.
Then we'll
Omar,
have
you were
a-
gonna say something?
Yeah, I'm on the board of Neighbors Link, so I feel like I should recuse myself from
Okay,
the
thank you.
conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm
No,
sorry, I
because-
misread it. Building owner and business owner. I transposed.
Okay.
My apologies.
Dana, any issues, any negative issues that we should be thinking about that we're missing?
Not at all.
Bob, problems? No problem? Good? All right, good to go. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we'll have that resolution on for April the 6th.
Right, in the minutes, I think just are gonna find that trustee Lopez recused himself, right? And that's it.
Well, there's no minutes for a work session.
Oh, no minutes for work session. So thanks for recusing yourself. It'll be up for a vote. So at that point,
That
I
is
guess.
correct.
Let the
Oh.
video show.
Let the
I
video. show.
recused.
Thank you. Nice, look nice. Okay, are we done? Excellent. Okay, we're going into exec, correct? For
First
legal?
is
or-
first is a matter of real property. And then will be legal / personnel. So the real property is first.
Okay, so we need motion to adjourn.
Please,
So
So
we'll.
moved. Second.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And we will see everybody next Wednesday for legislative session and have a good evening.